I don't know why they keep shifting me over some. I don't know if that's a plan or what. I think Teddy's designing this or something. I'm not sure what he's got in mind. So.
I don't know. We're
We're down Teddy.
Well, his stuff's here, so he must be here somewhere.
yeah, Teddy and Frank.
Smoke
He
break.
said Frank was coming.
Wait a minute, where's architect friend?
He
resigned.
He resigned.
When was that?
You were sitting right next to him when he did it.
Well, yeah, that's probably true.
He was white. No, you might not have been here that night, but yeah, he just told us that was.
Did it,
We got another one coming on board, don't we?
Yeah.
I heard. Yeah, I heard Mike Barker was coming.
Oh, Frank resigned? I didn't know that.
Last meeting tonight.
Oh, really?
I knew I'd heard that he was coming on for somebody.
thank you.
Just prefer one or Craig Bailey, okay? Corey Bailey. I'm just gonna let you know.
I had a frozen pizza.
You'll have to shut her up.
Oh, really? Okay.
She had something to say every day to you, everything.
Oh, really? No, we can't.
Oh, just fixing his experience.
I'm gonna suggest it though.
So get ready.
Okay.
You'll see what I
Create an
mean.
issue.
Oh, these are flyers. Okay. Is this number?
Karen, are you ready? Okay. If you would, please join us as stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for another opportunity to be here, Lord, and to serve the people of Walton County and to serve you. Pray that you'll just give us the wisdom and the discernment needed to make the best decisions in the interest of the citizens of Walton County and Walton County as a whole. Pray that you'll just be with each of us and be with those here who are here to speak, Lord, that we just keep the meeting civil and do business in a professional way that would be representative of how you would want us to do it. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
We'll go ahead and open the meeting. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. As far as announcements, real quick, if you haven't already done so, please silence your phones or turn them off. We can minimize interruptions as much as possible. Also, there's an extensive agenda tonight. We got a lot going on, a lot to do. We will have a 9 o'clock time certain end. Any items that have not been taken care of by that time will be moved to next month's agenda. And along those lines, if you're here to speak or to address any item, we certainly welcome and encourage everybody to participate, but be mindful of the heavy agenda. And if the issue that you're speaking about or have a concern about has already been raised, you can let us know that you agree with what somebody else said without having to go through the whole thing again to save us all some time. Mr. Carpenter?
Yes, sir. We have a couple of announcements. We have a request to continue from staff for item number 9, the Hilton Garden Inn, to give the applicant an opportunity to cure a public notice deficiency. And we'd like to request that that be continued to the next available planning commission meeting on February 9th at 5 p.m. in this location.
Okay, Commissioners?
Motion to continue.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. And then number 10, the Rolling Dunes project. We have a request to continue that item also to February 9th at 5 p.m. at this location. And let me just make sure.
The 8th.
Sorry, it's the 8th. It'll be the 8th on both of those items.
Okay. Commissioners?
Motion to continue.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. The first legislative item this evening is the Necias small-scale amendment. It's a request to approve by ordinance. It's been reviewed by Bob Barante, and I'll ask him to introduce this project.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is an application by ECM, Darrell Barnhill, on behalf of Dirt Investments, LLC. Their current future land use is conservation residential 2-to-1, and they are asking it to be amended to light industrial. The parcel is 9.75, and the project is located from the intersection of Walton County 393 and US 98.4 miles south of County Road 393, and the site is on the east side of Walton County 393. It went to Technical Review Committee on October 4th, where it was recommended to move it to the Planning Commission. The compatibility is consistent with the Walton County Comprehensive Plan, and staff concurs with the compatibility study findings. And if there's no further questions, I will turn it over to the applicant. And also, there were no public comments received for this project.
If I'm looking at that map, I guess the parcel across the street, Bob, is light industrial as well?
Yes, sir.
But most everything around it is conservation residential?
Yes, but there's a mix of industrial around it.
Okay.
This site was a nursery at one point, and I believe the structures, greenhouses and things are still there. It's
Okay.
Tom Talty for the applicant, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
You are?
Yeah, I'm involved in litigation with the parties.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a question. Do you know what they're intending to do with it?
No, not right now. There are wetlands on the site, so it's going to require some careful planning to get around the wetlands, and then it's still kind of being almost actively used. There's no almost. There are storing stuff on there, but I suspect it's going to down the road probably be very similar to what's across the street. The house, the typical warehouse, worker warehouse that is there, that is predominant actually in that part of 393 near 98.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you.
We don't have anybody who signed up to speak. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this item?
Coy Bowman, B-O-W-M-A-N. I have a question about all this rezoning that goes on, because it seems that there's been a lot of changing residential neighborhoods to not residential neighborhoods anymore. And I just don't understand what's going on, because it seems like if the trend continues that there's just not going to be any residential neighborhoods anymore, that everything's going to be converted into industrial commercial.
I think there's quite a bit of residential development going on all over Walton County, especially the south end.
Well, okay, that'll stop soon because it's against federal law. But my point is that just because there's a couple of warehouses across the street from here doesn't mean that you should be able to just turn this residential neighborhood into industrial, because then it's going to ruin all of the other residential properties around it.
Okay.
There's just too much of that going on, so that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
I got one question for Bob. Is there a traffic concurrency done on this? 'Cause I couldn't.
It was,
Maybe I'm blind.
The review.
yeah, it was reviewed by the, Dewberry, and the preliminary transportation concurrency analysis was also done by Dewberry, and that there are trips available, but obviously it's not vested until they actually.
So it's within capacity?
Yes, sir.
That's about my question.
I got a question. What is the, what are the uses in light industrial? Can you go through those?
You want all of them or just
What's allowed, yeah.
sampling? Okay.
Yeah, what's allowed?
Okay. Automobile maintenance and repair, blacksmith shops, boat works, custom building and repair, building material sales and storage yards, excluding asphalt or concrete mixing, building material sales or storage yards, excluding asphalt or concrete mixing, bulk materials or machinery storage fully enclosed, carpet and rug cleaning plants, communication towers, contractor's office and equipment and storage yards, dry cleaning and laundry plants serving more than one outlet, dyeing plants, extermination shops, food processing and packaging plants except meat packers, fuel oil, ice and wood sales, furniture cleaning plants, furniture refurbishing plants, lumber yards, manufacturing, including the production, processing and cleaning, testing and distribution of materials, goods, foodstuffs, and products in plants with less than 500,000 square feet of floor area or fewer than 2,000 total employees, many warehouses or storage facilities, monument works, ornamental iron workshops, pilot plants, publishing plants, scientific and example research testing or experimental laboratories, trade shops including cabinet, carpentry, planning, plumbing, refinishing and paneling, truck terminals, veterinarian offices with fully enclosed runs, yards, pens and kennels, warehouse, wholesale business storage.
Okay, thank you.
And this is already being used as a nursery?
Well, previously.
I mean, it has in the past?
Yes, sir.
Motion to approve?
Second.
You got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Just wanted to make sure they didn't-
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item on our agenda is the Pando Small Scale Amendment. This has been reviewed by Vivian Shamel, and she'll introduce his project.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is the Pando Small Scale Amendment application. They are requesting to amend the future land use designation from conservation residential 2:1 to low density residential on approximately 2.5 acres. The project is located on the north side of McCullough Lane off of South Dino Drive. This is located north of 30A and just east of Gulf Place off of 393. There is a little bit of history to the property. This was heard in 2016. It was ultimately denied by the Board of County Commissioners. They did have to wait 12 months before resubmitting, and they do have an updated compatibility analysis. There have been some changes in the adjacent properties and nearby that feels justified in, with their compatibility analysis. It's been updated.
Do you remember what they were asking for last time?
I believe they were asking for low-density residential. Yeah, same thing.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for staff at this time? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Scott Jenkins with Jenkins Engineering, representing the property owner, Susan Pando. She's also here. If you have any specific questions with her, I'll just give you a brief overview of what we're discussing. As Vivian said, there's 2.5 acres approximately that's located to the east of 393 here at north of 30A. This is Louisville Lane in this area. This is the property in question. It's vacant and undeveloped right now. If you look at the future land use map of the surrounding area, I'll just point out, this is the site, and you can see the brown represents conservation residential. If you look around this site, you can see the other land uses that surround it. Even though this property, this is Shadow Pine subdivision, is brown as conservation residential, it was actually developed at about 6 units per acre. It's about 30 lots on 5 acres roughly. This property is neighborhood infill. This property is low density residential. Was changed about a year ago to that. This property is Spyglass Hill Phase 2, is also low density residential. Was changed approximately for part of 2016 to low density residential. Neighborhood infill, which allows up to 8 units per acre. Neighborhood infill, the same. Small neighborhood to the south, which is a base density of 4, gives up to 10 density bonus points. And then the adjacent property here is low density residential, was changed to that last year. So you can kind of see from a development pattern, that's kind of the history of the site. The property, if you look at the definition for conservation residential in the code for the land development code, it basically lists it as for properties that are large tract parcels that have environmental constraints such as wetlands, salt marshes, floodplain considerations, things like that. This piece of property doesn't have any of those things. It's not a large tract. It doesn't have any floodplain. It doesn't have any wetlands considerations on it. And so it really kind of doesn't fit into that definition. The low density residential category would allow strictly single family residential development at a density of 4 units per acre, which is similar to what's being done around it. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have right now and then try to answer questions as they come up.
Scott, why was it denied by the commissioners last time?
You know, I didn't do the request, so I couldn't say for sure. I think it was really just a lack of some of the history and some of the other things that have gone on in the past year and a half in this area. I think one of the concerns was also that they did not have kind of a conceptual idea of what could go there. I do have a conceptual plan that kind of shows what it would look like with the 10 lots, assuming it was developed at the worst case scenario. That actually is a mirror image of what's being done right on the other side of the street.
Where are the roads in and out to get to that property?
393 is here. Louisville Lane is here. This is Deno. This is Michaela. And then the contractor's actually just constructed this road north and south for access. That's part of this development. So we'll access there. And again, this is kind of an idea of a maximum density development that would be allowed here, which is 10 units. And this would be kind of the layout. And again, you guys really, we can't commit to this or anything, so this isn't a development process, but it is a mirror image of what was approved on this side and constructed.
What's the stormwater?
We haven't done stormwater yet, just because this is a land use requirement. However, I can tell you this property stormwater is actually along the south side of the property with dry swells and retaining under your stormwater. So I would expect something similar here. Very good soils. Really don't have issues with standing water in the area.
It's not the same property owner though, right? Or is it?
Sir?
Is it the same property owner that owns the other piece?
It is not, no.
Did you do the engineering for the other piece?
I did, yes. Yeah, we've done the engineering for several. We've done it for this property, and this property over the last few years, so.
Okay. Commissioners, anything else for the applicant?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll open public comment. We had several people who signed up to speak, so we'll go through the list. Norm Brasher.
Thank you. I just want to make 3 points concerning the application. I am a adjacent property owner directly to the west, full-time permanent resident along with my wife Kathy, and we purchased the property undeveloped from the builder developer back in March of 14, and did a very thorough analysis of what was going to be happening around us. Our current home is 2.1 conservation residential. We have I believe it's 6 homes on a little over 2.5 acres for that zoning, and we have a full 100-foot conservation buffer in the back, directly adjacent to the property. These homes right here, this is mine.
Okay.
This conservation area. As a personal interest, if it was understood that would be the similar type construction, or at least density behind us with some conservation buffer as well. So you can imagine in purchasing it, we took that into account, having a similar type buffer here and here. Now, in the proposed development, we will have actually homes that are 90 degrees right back on our property line. So to me, that's a major differential for us in terms of how our property will be affected in the future and potentially on valuation of the property. One of the things that is interesting is that we have, obviously this has been fully developed. This property has now been fully developed in terms of infrastructure, 2 homes built with the same configuration, same density, and the same conservation here. So that follows 2.1, and this property has been done the same. It now has 4 homes with the same density. They don't have conservation, they have carriage houses back here, but it is the same permanent residence, large driveways, 2-car garages, off-street parking, permanent residences. We have a total of 13 homes within that group. 11 are full-time, part-time, or full-time residences. 2 are part-time, but they do not rent the homes out. So
Could they rent the homes out if they wanted to?
Yes, there's no covenant or restrictions that I'm aware of that prevent that from happening. But my point is there's an extreme high market demand for this type of product in our area. The homes sell, they're built, so I see no real compelling evidence to just go and change the comprehensive plan. It seems to be working well. The compatibility statement in the application, for that reason, to me, if you read the last sentence, that the proposed future land use reclassification from conservation residential 2.1 to low density residential will allow for the scale and character of the proposed development to match the scale and character of existing developments within the area. That is certainly not the case for everything in the immediate area that's currently at that planned land use. So that would be a contradiction in my mind. The last issue that I would, in the interest of time, that I would like to bring up is we currently have a real traffic problem in this area, and I'm sure there's gonna be traffic engineering studies and software calculations and that type of thing. But the reality is that all of the traffic from this site and the just developed, this is the old Florida Village, 10 homes that's within the compatibility of that plan use, will have to traverse this direction up Michaela, with all of this density. There are a lot of short-term rentals, a lot of people parking on the streets, a lot of people not familiar with the area. Coming up, turn on the South Deno, and then up Luba Lane, which again has a lot of short-term rental activity, a lot of street parking. Most of the time, you can only traverse down those streets one direction at a time. People using the streets to go to the beach. We now have a lot of permanent residences here and here that also have small children, and and of course they're playing outside. So I think anything that can be done to reduce the amount of traffic, and certainly this will, if this is taken to a higher density, that's not going to help that situation whatsoever. So it's already a real safety concern, and anything we can do to help that would be, I think, would be in the county's best interest. We also have a very dangerous intersection right here with Luba teaming into Luba teaming into 393. 393 is marked as a 25-mile-an-hour traffic speed limit right now, and we joke that that's the half speed limit because most of your construction, your people not familiar with the area, even everyday folks are doing 40 to 50. The sheriff's department has been working with us and trying to slow it down, but we got very limited sight lines at that intersection too, so that's just another pinch point for us with all of this flowing in. So certainly down the road, years from now, with Seacross paved, and you get a back door into there, that might be a potential relief, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So
Okay.
that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that there's one way in and one way out for all these properties?
That is correct. Right now, they have just, the developer of Old Florida Village, Phase 2, just created this section of B Road that will be, their proposal is to put a road here with 5 homes, on that small street. Everything flows this way to Michaela, down, turns on the South Deno, and turns on Luba. You can go up Deno now all the way to Seacroft. Seacroft is dirt. It's unpaved, and no one, by default, no one uses that. So,
But all the rest of that in the back's one way in, one way out?
that is correct.
Okay.
This whole area right here, everything over here is going in there right now.
Okay.
And it's choked to one lane because of people parking, because of people that will park on the street on Luba.
Okay.
Your house is to the west.
Yes, sir, my house is right here, right here, so our common property line is right here. And again, conceptually, the thought was, this is a mandated conservation buffer. This is gonna be a mandated conservation buffer. We certainly need that style, or that conservation.
Why would
area.
you assume that other property would have a mandated conservation buffer?
Because that's currently the way it's
Okay.
zoned.
Okay.
to one.
All right.
Same zoning. Okay,
Mr. Carpenter, you had something to add? You can sit down, sir. Thank you.
thank you.
Just to speak to the Seacroft Road Plan, the BCC has approved and funded the design, the engineering design of that, and that's been contracted to Dewberry, and that's underway right now, paving the entire length of Seacroft Road. Betty Wright at Public Works reports this afternoon that they plan to include the paving, the construction portion of Seacroft Road in the 2018-29 budget, subject to the approval of the BCC. But that will be funded from the TIF fund.
Okay.
That's the road to the north, Mac?
Let's see.
That's the road immediately.
That, right, yeah.
Yeah. Now, is there a road
Which is
from
present.
that down to this, where this property is?
It won't make a quite connection, but if this property gets developed, rather than just having one connection over to Michaela Lane, we will require them to stub out, anticipate that that's gonna be continued all the way over to
Okay.
Westgate County.
Okay,
So that we do have, interconnectivity.
okay. Mike, is it Hewitt?
Good evening. Mike Hewitt, Hewitt. Some of the comments that were referenced about this, I'd like to address. The piece of property here that the prior gentleman referred to, that's actually, I'm the developer and owner of this property. And I actually downsized it. I went from a higher density of 8 units to the acre, and I actually went down to 4 units to the acre. I came before this commission as well as the Board of Commissioners and actually went down from 8 to 4. Okay? It just so happens this is the property I developed. A friend of mine, Ms. Panda, owns this property, which is one of the few remaining conservation residential parcels in the area. 2 to an acre. All of the adjoining abutting properties actually exceed the 2.1 units per acre, including the gentleman that lives in Spyglass that just spoke. They're currently have 6 homes on 2.1 or 2.5 acres. They didn't go all the way to 10, and I happen to be friends with the developer, Mr. Abbott, and that was by choice. Okay? He could have, but he chose not to. He did much bigger lots. And it just so happens the same gentleman who is developing the same piece that Scott Jenkins is helping with his approvals for here, could have done the same thing, but he's coming from larger lots. That's by choice. Okay? But it certainly exceeds the 2 units per acre. It's on the lower end of the low-density residential designation, which is, could take it up to 10. He's at 6, but that gives a variance if you can take it from 6 to 10. He just chose to do 6. The property, this is Louisville Lane. Okay, it comes in off of 393. Okay. This is my property as well. I've completed that neighborhood, and it's 10 homes per acre, low density residential, a total of 10 home sites, of which I'm finishing the last home now. Okay. People rarely park on Louisville Lane as one of the homes I built is for a sheriff's office. Each one of those homes has a full-size garage and parking for 4 homes in the driveway. There's 5 parking spots there. There's no need for people to park on the street out there. Now, if there's some workers or maintenance or somebody's landscaping, that kind of stuff, yes, maybe there will be. I think if there's a problem with parking anywhere in the neighborhood, it would be in this neighborhood, which is known as Gulf Reflections. Okay? Now, that was NPA infill, up to 8 units per acre. Okay? There's 15 homes that sit on that property, plus a common area swimming pool, which is located directly across the street from the gentleman that just spoke, and when he bought his home, he knew that. I too developed that, but I bought it from a bank. It wasn't my project, I just bought the lots. The developer came before the county many, many years ago and got it approved and put it in when the recession hit. It sat empty for 6 years. Okay, I didn't plat and record that at 8 units per acre. He did many, many years ago. The grass was this tall on each lot when I bought it. The pool had collapsed in, the bathrooms had fallen over, and then the whole neighborhood had sit in disrepair. Okay, I bought it, cleaned it up, and finished it. But it was 8 units per acre. It's not what Ms. Panda was asking for. She's asking to go to 4 units to the acre, which is very compatible with everything around it. I understand concerns for people. I've had some of them calling me. Everybody has their slice of heaven now, and they don't want the noise, the traffic. I'm proud to say some of the kids that are driving around the neighborhood, they're in homes that I built. Okay? They know me by name. They need an issue, they come over. Some of the people in their subdivision actually have contacted me and come over. It's not in my neighborhood and said, can you help me with something? Thanks here. which I would, and I had. There was an issue with drainage. Went back at my own expense and helped it. Even though the county approved something that wasn't effective doing the job for drainage, the county approved it, and I put it in a way y'all asked me to in design. It wasn't doing the job, so I went back and spent my money to fix it. There's about 20 or 30 homeowners in there. I went by name, very reasonable, very approachable. You can always contact and I'll help them out. Ms. Pando is only asking, in this site right here where the street is in, let me make sure everyone knows, that's not Old Florida Village. That's Max Matthews. It has nothing to do with that property. That's my property. I'm Max Matthews. I went before the commission. I said I want to go down in density from 8 units down to 4. Y'all approved it. I put in the street, water, sewer, utilities, the infrastructure. In about a month or two, I'll start building my houses. Okay? Just like I did in these other neighborhoods. Not at 8 units per acre, just at 4. Okay? And that's all Ms. Pano's doing. There's not one piece of property that abuts anywhere around that's at 2 units per acre. None. Including the one that the gentleman just spoke about that he lives in. He lives in one that it's only 2.5 acres and it has 6 houses on it. That's by Bill's choice. Okay? And again, a lot of these people contact me. I'm here. They can speak to me. We can help work these things out. But these are nice houses. 2,600 square feet. Everyone has garage, plenty of parking, swimming pool, fenced-in backyards. Okay.
Mr. Hewitt, I don't want to cut you off. I appreciate everything you've had to say. You've been very educational for me.
One more point I'd like to make, Mr. Stewart. The gentleman that just spoke brought up a good point. His concern, I believe, would be privacy because this neighborhood is in his backyard. It's important you understand, behind his houses, see his lots go from here to here, is back 100 feet. His developer, Bill Abbott, chose to keep that wooded as his choice of where he would put his preservation. Instead of in the front or on the sides, he chose the back. It's a 100-foot buffer. We will have some sort of buffer on the Pando site as well. So at a minimum, they'll have minimum. If we went up to the property line, which you all know we can't, there's 100 feet of woods between their cleared off backyard where they mow their grass and where Ms. Pando's property even begins. 100 feet. Okay? That's astronomical in South Walton County. They have that much privacy. That's the last point I'd like to make. Okay?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Denise Koff.
Hello. How are
Hello.
you all?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you all for being here tonight. I live next to Norm, actually, who was up here earlier. We're on the last lot 6 of the Dino or Deno Drive street, and I was here a year ago. We all listened to the same request. The request hasn't changed. You all, maybe it was maybe this was the commission meeting, the county commissioners. They were supposed to come back with a plan if they wanted to bring this issue back up again a year later. And I know you guys are all taking the time to be here, but the homeowners have to take the time to be here, and we take vacation time. We have to leave our desks to fight this, and we're fighting it. The same request a year later. And I just heard the man up here earlier who said this is kind of an idea. I don't think it was a detailed plan as to what they're going to do with the land. I don't think they know much more than they do.
Well, at this stage,
A year
they're not
ago.
required to present a plan. This is a land use change.
They were asked to.
No,
They're asked
they're not required to.
I didn't say they were required to. But I would like to, if you would, take a look at something I put together.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to. While that's going around, I just want to address a couple of things that Michael Hewitt mentioned. The reason there isn't much 2.1 per acre is because you've already allowed him to build and change land use on property he just developed off of Louva Lane. So I'm here to tell you the other side of the story, which is if you look at the first page of the handout, I live on the first subdivision listed, that's Dino Drive. So I've listed 5 divisions or developments, whatever you want to call them. It totals about 15 acres, and there is only one way into these 15 acres and one way out. And even when Seacroft is paved, there's still one way in, one way out. Seacroft does not join up with the Pando property. Right now, Seacroft would butt up to the 3 cell towers that are sitting on that property, and they're going to be there a while, at least a year. So I don't see the property where the cell towers are right now being developed anytime soon. So traffic is a big issue. And I moved here about the same time as Norm in 2014 because we love the county. You know, we used to travel here from Texas and visit Destin, and we just got lucky and found a rental that brought us to 30A. We had never heard of 30A, and we couldn't believe the trees. And that's why I'm here, is to tell you all that take a look around our county, and the trees are being pulled out quite left and right. So anyway, I wanted to go through these developments to let you know that the 2 that have asterisks by them are 2 that have had land use changes. Pretty dramatic change. Mr. and Mrs. McCloskey fought the Louva Lane Gulf Place Retreat because they bought their home thinking that other people would build like them next door, Conservation Residential 2-1. It was changed, and Mr. Hewitt won and put in 10 homes rather than about 5. And he said he would give the McCloskeys a great barrier, but if you look, they can be out on their balcony and they look straight down the road that was put in it's actually called Gulf Place Retreat. So he's already been given leniency and the ability to build onto Conservation Residential 2-1. The way I've looked at this is that out of 15 acres, the Shadow Pines Michaela Lane, that should have been Conservation Residential. Right now there's 30 lots being built, and those are being built very slowly because people don't want that type of living. They're living more in the type of home we live in with a 2-car garage, a backyard. The Michaela Lane, they're more built out to be a rental property. So 20 extra lots are in red there. That's the extra density that was put onto Michaela Lane. The Louva Lane that Mr. Hewitt just built on, it went from 5 to 10 lots. The Pando that he's proposing, or Mrs. Pando's proposing, would be identical to Gulf Place Retreat. And so we've lost 7.32 acres of conservation residential land, which the definition I looked up, 60% of that should be left untouched. So that's 4 acres at least that should be left untouched that we don't have in our neighborhood anymore, that's now built on. And the density, if you look at 71 homes are now going to be built around me when it should have been 41, an increase of 30 homes. So 30 over the original plan is a 73% density increase. And the second page is just to visually look at what that 73% looks like, and you can just imagine looking at traffic and trees, you have a lot more homes in the lower box. That's the homes that will be built on the 15 acres around me versus the 41 that should have been built with the original plan. And you can just visually see that density. And we don't feel that we need to continue to make exceptions by someone wanting to build something. You know, if they came in and said there's a reason and it benefits the county to build 10 homes versus 5, I'd love to hear the benefit. And that's not what they're coming in here and saying. They use a lot of terms about compatibility, consistency. But to be consistent, we have 6 homes that back up to preservation. Next to me will be 5 homes with preservation behind that. So that all backs up to the cell towers that will be gone one day. And then I would hope that to be consistent, it would make sense.
So you think everything should be the same?
No, I think we're talking about consistency.
Right.
So if it backs, I mean, that's what their argument always is consistency, compatibility.
Does consistency mean everything has to be the same?
I hope not.
Okay.
But you know
I would
they
ask
use
you
the
to go ahead
word
and wrap up.
compatibility.
I don't want to argue with you, and I don't want to cut you off, but you've been
Okay.
given a lot of time.
All right, let
And
me
there's
just,
other people
can
who
I,
want to speak
okay,
as
I'll
well.
just read one thing. This is a Sotheby's booklet that came out a year ago. Chairwoman Jones spoke to the county when she said, "We are quickly nearing the build-out of South Walton, and we have a very established development pattern there. What has happened is very indicative of the board's foresight and our plan of development, which has been in place since 1996, where you see a natural area, a lot of scrub oak preservation. We limit building height. We require a great deal of setback from the coastal area, and all those things have come together over the years to create a very unique place. We applaud the commissioner and government officials as they reiterated many times that regulations have been put in place to keep Walton County as special and unique as it is." Mr. Svella concluded the meeting by saying, "Our scenic corridor is such a valuable resource to protect as far as the look and feel and how families live in this area. So it may be harder for people to get an actual permit, but it's only harder because we want it to be special." And I thank you.
Thank you.
For listening.
Paul Koff?
Hi, I'm Paul Kauf, and I'm at 32 North Dino Drive with my wife. Just a couple of things that, and I think just to reiterate and make it quick because a lot of the same points have been made. And I don't want to take up too much time.
Thank you.
But when we did show up here to find the house, I did a lot of research. I looked around because we lived in an unincorporated area in Fairview, Texas, where I was very concerned about open land behind me and all that type of stuff. So I looked at zoning or planning or whatever you guys call it here in Walton County. And I knew directly behind us was conservation residential, which meant there was going to be no more than 6 homes or 2 per acre, and there's 2.5 acres, 5 homes back there. So I was comfortable with that. I knew what was going to be across. I did know across the street that there was a lot of homes. I made that choice with the information that I had at that point. Since we've been there, like my wife said, that we've changed things along our entrance on the way in, which was supposed to be conservation, more homes there. It just seems like we keep going this, and to me, the only thing that increasing the homes does is helps developers make a little bit more money, and it doesn't necessarily help the homeowners around. I moved into that area with the knowledge of the way everything was going to be set up. The only other thing that I wanted to say too is that the original thing, and I think the additional application came with a traffic study. Traffic study makes statements about there's not room there, it's in the thing. I'm sure you all have read it and everything like that, but it does say that there is not capacity for this to be able to be done. Things need to be done, and they might have to pay extra money to the county to get that to happen. So that to me means there's not capacity, and just changing it without a complete plan, like here's exactly what I'm going to build and here's why I need to build it, doesn't make sense. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Susan Pardo? Or Pando, I'm sorry. You don't have to speak if you don't, unless you want to.
No, I do. Hi, I'm Susan Pondo, and I'm actually the property owner. And to go with a little more history, I've owned this property with my family for 40 years. We've paid taxes on it for 40 years. I certainly thought I was going to build a home before 40 years, but I love this place, and that's why we bought it 40 years ago. Now, these other people that have spoken, I think they've owned it since 2014. Certainly changes have happened in the last 40 years. When we bought the property, there were no zoning. That happened in 1996. And when that happened, we were never notified that it happened. I only found out in 2015 when my mother died that I had 2 to 1. So I would like to say that I love this county and that we want to make it beautiful, and as beautiful as it was 40 years ago when I fell in love with it. And I certainly have no intention of destroying the property. And the reason it was denied, actually, it was denied 3-2, and it was denied because I personally was not prepared, and my opposition was prepared. and the engineer that I had at that time, he was not prepared, and they just were better at protesting than I was actually saying what we wanted to do. So it was a close vote. It was 3-2, and given the fact that I'd never done anything like this, and from my understanding, the people that spoke previously have done a lot of protesting. So I hope I got better at it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew White. Andrea, I'm sorry. Let me put my glasses on, don't I?
You're on a roll.
People usually don't make that mistake.
That's okay.
Good evening. I live across the street from Denise and Norm, and when I moved here, I looked at the future land use plan, and I believe that's the reason the area has retained its charm and its exclusivity. And we still have enough undeveloped land here that if we keep granting exceptions, we could lose that exclusivity. And I agree with my neighbors that we bought here relying on this plan, and Mrs. Pondo said that she didn't have the opportunity to, in 1996, to subdivide prior to this. And I believe either you pay taxes on one parcel, you pay taxes on 10 parcels, your taxes would have been higher had you subdivided in 1996. But I think the only thing that separates us from Destin is our land use plan. And just because somebody can make more money by putting more houses on it, I don't think that's a valid reason to grant the exception.
You said you live across the street.
Yes,
Is that to the west,
to the north.
to the north?
I think I have trouble with direction.
Northwest.
Northwest.
Okay.
Further down.
So you live in one of those 6 houses?
We have 5 houses, the houses with the carriage houses across the street.
She's actually
Okay.
Okay.
here, which is Spyglass Phase 2, which we changed the land use from conservation residential to LDR. Same request 2 years ago.
How many houses?
We did the same thing. So everything needs to be the same.
Y'all, please don't comment.
I moved here from Miami, and what I saw there was a domino effect. A lot of time and effort went into city planning and coming up with a plan, and then as soon as it went in place, people would come and ask for exceptions. And I couldn't live there anymore. I mean, it was just so crowded and so dense and so much crime, and the infrastructure was so stressed by the overdevelopment. And you have an opportunity to keep that from happening here, and I hope you do.
How many houses are in your subdivision?
5.
5?
There are 5 with a carriage house on each lot, so 10 structures.
So each of those lots has a home and a carriage house. Are they 2 separate residences?
Just those, well, not all of them. Two currently have carriage houses.
Okay, and those carriage houses are separate residences?
Yes.
Well, it's part of the same residence. It's not 2 separate. It's 2 separate structures, but it's on the same lot.
On the same lot, you have 2 different places where people live?
Well, no,
Is that correct?
It's my guest house.
Okay. That's what I needed to know. Okay. Anybody else have any questions for this? Okay, thank you, ma'am. And we've had nobody else sign up to speak. Is there anybody who wishes to speak?
Corey Bowman, I'll be quick. I did want to emphasize 2 points that were already made, which is that the developer's point of consistency is that this preservation was not. It was allowed to be overdeveloped, and many of the pieces of land around this were allowed to be overdeveloped. That because all of these other places were allowed to do something they weren't supposed to do, that he should be able to do it too. And that's the problem that we had with our most recent commissioners, is that they allowed all of this building that wasn't supposed to happen. And the other guy, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, he said something about some other pieces of property he had developed. He actually would have been allowed to put more homes on them, but chose not to, is because people don't really want to live that way. People don't want to live right next door to somebody, like a townhouse in San Francisco. You know, this space. Another reason that the federal government established one house per half acre is because this ground isn't geologically stable. And if you were to completely cut down all of the greenery on it and put houses all over it, this land will just wash away after the next hurricane. What keeps this land healthy and happy is the trees growing on it. The roots themselves actually keep the land in place. So that's one of the reasons they said you can't build the majority of this island has to remain undeveloped. And these high density packed neighborhoods that unfortunately got approved by somebody weren't supposed to be approved because they're extremely unhealthy for the land. And I'm not talking about the complications that we have with sewage and drainage and all of that, but they're extremely unhealthy for the land. Okay. So then I actually wanted to point out something specific about this piece of property, which is that if you click on the oldest deed from 1978, it says it was purchased by Pondo from somebody named Forrest and Weed. Fields, Forrest and Weed, highly suspicious names. But then if you go to the deed above that, which says 1981, 3 years later, you actually find a deed from 1972, 6 years before Miss Pondo's mother bought the property. And it's not actually a deed. It's where the International Paper Company seized this land from the Florida Department of Transportation. I'm guessing this is because at some point the land had to be handed over to the road in order to put a road in.
Can I ask you where you're going with this?
What I'm saying is that there's not a clear chain of deeds to this
Okay.
piece of property.
Okay.
And that might be one of the reasons why it was never able to be developed before. And the fact that it was seized by the paper company means that the reason this wasn't developed is because it was part of the timberland. And that's why there weren't residential/commercial neighborhoods established before 96, because this entire piece of land was timberland.
Thank you very much.
So anyways, it's probably not legal to build on it.
Thank you.
Pretty sure timber company can't seize property.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to point out a couple of things, actually. Again, the reason that this development, where a couple of the people that spoke tonight, is 6 lots, and it's laid out the way it is. I was the engineer record for this, I was the agent for this. It is neighborhood infill. It would have allowed 8 units per acre. I think at one point it was actually approved for 20 lots, or somewhere around there at one time. The reason this is this way is because Mr. Abbott and Mr. Wood, who developed this, did not want to build any additional infrastructure. They knew they were going to have to pave this section of road, so they wanted to front off that road they were already going to have to pave. This was at a little different time where the market wasn't quite as good as it is now, and they were trying to do it as economically as they could. The reason that this preservation is in the rear was that they had a specific habitat that had to be preserved, and they chose to do it in the rear of these lots because, again, they didn't want to pay into a preservation buyout fund for that. So
What could they have built on there, Mr. Jenkins?
They could have bought a portion of this out. They actually could have built up to 20 lots. I can't say they could have fit them, but they could have at 8 units per acre. I would assume it probably would have been something similar to what was across the road. I think that's what was approved at one time, was a different phase of this project.
When was that project that you're pointing at, when was it built?
I'm going to say the infrastructure was put in probably around 2004, 2005.
So it was there before that
Yes.
project?
It's been there for a while.
And the piece to the south of it was in there too?
This is south is in there also.
Okay, so those were all in there with higher densities when that sub-property was developed?
As well as this development on this side.
Okay.
So, all those have been there for 10 years or so.
Okay.
Again, the only other thing that I would point out was, there was one person that spoke to the sanctity of the plan and not changing the plan. They live in the middle of a development that we changed the plan on. about 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, for the exact same reports. So I just want to point that out, and that this is the process. This is, everybody wants to know, should they just be able to do it as everybody else has? Well, the answer to that is sort of yes, because you have to match what the development pattern is. That's why we're here. That's the only reason you have this process, is so that when things change, you can request a change to that. So those are just things I wanted to point out that I heard with this.
The piece to the east of it, which is neighborhood infill,
Yes.
that, how many units could be put in there?
They could have done up to 8-inch breaker times 2.5, which would have been 20.
Is it not developed yet?
This piece
To the,
is-
to the east of it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That
This
orange piece
property-
right-
This property actually is Mr. Hewitt's property, where the engineer record on this also. He went from infill, which would have allowed 20 units, down to low density residential when it did 10.
So the same,
He has 10 lots.
same thing you're asking for here?
The exact same thing.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Oh. They also asked to point out that they would be more than willing, and the county would probably require that they pave the road to the north of
I
town.
was gonna say, would there be a connector there?
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a roadway there now?
There's a roadway that runs to the middle of this property that
Mhm.
Mr. Hewitt built as part of this development. When this comes in, they would likely have to extend up to Seacroft. There's 66-foot easement that runs up.
There is an easement there that runs, okay. That's something, Mac, that we could address in the development process.
Yes, sir, and that's exactly why I mentioned that earlier, because we're very much interested in connectivity, especially to get traffic over to Seacroft Road, which is programmed to be paved in the near future.
Right, and that makes sense, I mean.
And that
you know,
provides an alternate route to get to County Road 393 much quicker than going through the Michaela Lane and winding back through those other developments. We believe that people would choose to use Seacroft Road if there was a paved connector.
Well, if it was
available
paved,
to it.
obviously they would, if there's a connector to get to it.
And that is why it's moving up on the priority list for paving.
Okay. Okay. Commissioners?
Has there, this was denied by the planning commission and?
No, the BCC.
The BCC. I read somewhere that it was denied
Okay,
by both. What's changed? Has anything changed?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was asking you.
Yes, sir, just the areas around it have actually changed to support this. Again, this property was changed within the last year and approved for development and has been constructed for low density residential, which matches exactly what's being requested here. You guys have approved several cell towers to go on the adjacent property to the north, so it's just really a pattern.
Please hold your comments down.
But even that,
Don't comment, please.
but even that's zone neighborhood infill for future development, so you're looking at 8-to-1 on that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Everything around this piece of property has got more density on it than what it's currently zoned. So, and every one of the people that have got something against this property are living in areas that have a higher density than this property zoned.
Mhm.
So, in order to be consistent, I think you change the density to what they're requesting.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any other discussion, commissioners? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
No.
Did you vote no?
I voted no, yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioners. That moves us to our third legislative item. This is the amendment to Chapter 7 of the Land Development Code to provide for the tourist-oriented development signs. Bob Barante has reviewed this, and he will provide an explanation.
Mr. Chair, I will go very quickly since you have the information in front of you. I just want to touch on a few objects. We're obviously talking about adding the tourist-oriented directional signs, TODs, to the LDC in Chapter 7. This would allow, this is a federal, then an FDOT program would allow Walton County to allow certain directional signs only on the state right-of-way outside of the 3 designated scenic corridors. I've given you pictures, examples. I'm sure you've all seen these pictures on your travels. Just want to touch on one thing. These signs cannot be for national chains or franchise businesses or restaurants. They are for tourist-oriented businesses that have to have 51% of their business from more than 20 miles away. So basically tourism or something special to the community, like a winery or an agricultural use. Like I said, no change. The application, we would recommend that be at the same at the sign application of $75. And then after talking to the Director of Public Works and Greg Graham, the county engineer, their recommendation is, you see I had it bolded, typically the county or the municipality uses their own sign shop to make the signs, but the applicant pays all the expenses. It was recommended, and I don't have it in here because it was already submitted, that we don't use Public Works, that we make it a free enterprise on the economy. So the price of the signs would be whatever the applicant would go and purchase. They would still have to meet the federal requirements for brightness and reflectiveness and such, so the quality would still be there. So we just gave this to you as a little briefing and read through, and any suggestions you may have or improvements you may want to add, I would recommend just letting me know, contacting me. And I'd just also like to point out, typically this is also on county right-of-ways, but since this is a new process, we wanted to start with just the state right-of-ways, and the commitment was asked at the BCC when we asked permission to move forward to stay out of the scenic. So it is written in the proposed ordinance to stay out of the scenic. And if you don't have any questions, I'll sit down.
Commissioners, any questions?
So none of this applies to any of the scenic corridors?
No, sir. It's specifically written in there, not in the scenic corridors. It'll be on state right-of-way outside of the corridors.
Highway 90, 331, 20.
Well, 331 out of the...
Outside of the scenic corridor?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Commissioners, let me see, we have, anybody signed up? Anybody would like to speak on this item? How do I know you usually be one want to talk?
Coy Bowman.
What you
I'm
got?
sorry, I missed what you said.
I said, how do I know you be the one want to talk?
Well, because
Pretty good guess, huh?
just about everything that's done here is done wrong, and I have to
Okay.
point that out. Okay, so these are going to be signs that direct tourists to places to go, yes?
Correct.
Okay, so I read somewhere that we have about 9 million tourists that come here each year. Crazy number, right? I don't know how we deal with the surge. But I also read somewhere that, you know, the Tourist Development Center, the building down there at 331 and 98 that has all the pretty pamphlets that show people what to do and all of that. I read a statistic that only 1% of the tourists that came here actually went to that building to look for something to do here. So I think that out of 9 million people that come here, if only 1% of them are going to the TDC to find out where to go and what to do, I think those 9 million people already know where they're going. I mean, 30A is just one little 30-mile strip, and everything is on it. So I don't really see a need for any more signs telling anybody where to go, because it seems to me that they already know where they're going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a point to bring us back to reality. None of these signs will appear in South Walton. None of these signs will direct anyone to anything south of the bay.
Thank you.
Them, are they directing? I mean, what are we looking at then?
We've had a specific request from Windswept Dunes, the golf course up east of Freeport. They would qualify for this kind of sign, provided they demonstrate that 51% of their customers travel for more than 20 miles from their site. There are some other restrictions that they must meet in order to be eligible, but this would typically be a sign that would direct you to Windswept Dunes. It would probably be located on South Highway 81, directing you west on Highway 20 near that intersection.
Potentially, it could go to Blackstone.
Could potentially go to the Blackstone Golf Course. That would probably qualify also.
Negotiate.
Yeah. So nothing, this doesn't apply to the south end. This is to help the north?
Yes, sir. This would be a North County opportunity.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody else wish to speak on this? All right.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And we're gonna take about a 10-minute break before we get to this next one, because I think it's gonna take a while.
What is the next
Comprehensive plan.
one? Oh, yeah. I don't know, do we have people here to oppose it, or?
I don't know. There's nobody signed
Probably
up.
gonna be a long
Good.
explanation.
Yeah, it's gonna be, but we're not gonna probably take any action on it tonight. Just a presentation.
Before everybody, enough time, can you explain this next thing to me a little bit?
The next issue that's coming up, I think we just wait till it comes up, because it's gonna get explained to everybody.
Revising the infrastructural element of the solid waste for portable water. Is there any?
You just have to.
You have to
get
wait,
started, yeah.
and we have all the commissioners up here.
Okay. It just sounds really confusing.
Yeah, and he's trying to figure out what he wants to do with his lab.
Oh, did you get, what did you say?
Hospitality.
Oh, okay.
Huh? Well, I mean, it's the only thing, really around here.
Yeah.
Builder or realtor.
Does he want to get it back over there?
I'm encouraging him to move to Birmingham, Atlanta, Dallas, get a job at a bank like I did right out of school, and there's a lot of opportunity. And he's worked at Pizza by the Sea on and off for 8 years. So Jason Beer, who owns Pizza by the Sea, they're getting ready to open up a new one in Sandestin, shops in Sandestin, and San Michael. So he met with Jason today, and they're talking about putting him in charge over there.
Darren, are you ready? Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. And item number 4 is up next.
Okay, I can't see it though. Oh, I can barely. We have part 3 of the comprehensive plan amendments, guys. And hi, Michael, nice to meet you. It's your first
Thank
night?
you. Second.
Second, okay, I haven't seen you before. I'm Kristen, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Kristen.
Is it on? Okay, great, thanks. So we have intergovernmental coordination, capital improvements, and infrastructure tonight. We have all of the infrastructure sub-elements except for solid waste that we'll bring back later. So the only things that we'll have left in the comprehensive plan update after tonight is solid waste and the capital improvement schedule, the actual schedule, which I'm not asking you to act on tonight because it's not completed yet. It's part of the capital improvement element. Just skip through all these. We know all this. I think by now you guys know what we're trying to do here. So there's a couple issues that I want to talk about in some of these elements just to point out, because I know this is a lot of words. and a lot of changing, a lot of moving around, a lot of shifting around. In the intergovernmental coordination element, and the we're actually striking the whole public schools facilities element. That is the proposal here, and that element contains public school concurrency. So that program never has yielded any funds to the school because there is a requirement in the statute that if you have available capacity anywhere in the district, basically, you have to consider that. So if we have capacity in the middle, in the schools in Freeport or in the North County, we have to kind of consider that when we're looking at capacity in the South End schools. And so we never, it doesn't net anything. And in a real world, we know we're not going to be shipping kids up. You know, that would be really difficult. So it just hasn't worked. And especially when you're divided by water like we are, it's very difficult. And we will be presenting that to the school board and talking to them. We've already been talking to them, of course, and they agree on a staff level with this change. And we'll be going to their actual school board meeting next Tuesday to talk about it.
So what that does is remove the little blurb that we have in every one of these staff reports that says the school district has reviewed the plans, and said, would that take that away? Or
No, sir. They will actually still be part of the TRC. There still is lots of mechanisms for coordination and sharing of information and review. And they still have the ability on like plan amendments to object based on capacity. They have the ability to ask for school sites and developments and things like that. So all of that coordination does not go away, and they will still be part of the TRC.
This just takes away potential funding.
That's right.
But that has never happened.
That's right.
Okay.
So it's kind of a liability hanging out there, a big nothing.
Okay.
So as part of that, we will have to update the interlocal agreement, and that agreement is between the county, all of the cities, and the school board. So that's going to be a big effort to get that updated. And we want to make sure it maintains all those coordination mechanisms, because it's important for us to talk and for them to know what development's occurring and for us to know what they're doing. Okay.
what was that thing about sidewalks?
Yeah, that's, I'm sorry, I missed that. Good eye. There is a requirement currently in the comprehensive plan that developments install sidewalks if they are within 2 miles of a school to that school. It hasn't been implemented in the land development code, and we do require sidewalks in a different way, and we either need to implement it in the code or remove it from the comprehensive plan. So that is something I am looking for a recommendation from you guys on tonight.
Where would that fit in the code?
Well, we'd have to put it in chapter 5, in the development standards, you know, where the other sidewalk requirements are would be logical.
Well, is there room for tweaking on the 2 miles?
Absolutely.
That's
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Nobody walks 2 miles to school anymore.
But maybe a half a mile would be reasonable, or 3/4. You know.
I'd say even a mile.
A mile would, but 2 miles is
kids
not.
will ride their bike a mile to school. But
yeah, but 2 miles is not reasonable.
I think a mile would be sufficient, but I think there has to be some way to require that for schools.
And most of the time when I'm seeing this type of requirement, they also offer a fee in lieu of construction. So that's also something you can consider.
I would rather not do that. I'd like to see them put the sidewalks in.
I'm not a
I think
big fan
anytime
of
you allow them to buy something out, they're going to buy it out because
Yeah.
it's a whole lot cheaper. And I think at the end of the day, especially with something like this, a sidewalk is much more beneficial. I'd rather see it there.
And then the sidewalk never gets built.
Right.
And so we're really just taking money from the developer for no reason. I'd rather see the sidewalk built.
Well, then you get those sections where somebody didn't buy out and they put a sidewalk in. It doesn't go
You
anywhere.
got a 200-foot sidewalk that don't connect to nothing.
So let's do it all. Do it right.
I would say a mile is sufficient, but I would not like to see a buyout option.
Okay.
I agree. He's on target.
Okay. So if you get, that could be part of your recommendation if you feel that way.
Do you want to do these all at one time, or do you want us to
Yeah,
motion?
I think it would be easier if we did them by element, because
Okay.
there's going to be these little things in here like this. So we'll, the first item would be the repeal of the public schools facilities element and the intergovernmental coordination element changes.
No, the sidewalks are part of that change?
That's right.
So you would need that noted in that motion.
That's right.
Okay. Danny, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like, I move that we do all that except the policy about sidewalks, that we retain that with a 1 mile, 1 mile circumference instead of the 2 miles, and there's no buyout included.
Oh, I can't say.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Anything else on this portion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next element is the capital improvements element. And again, we're not asking you to act on the actual schedule. We'll bring that back to you next month, hopefully February. And we did, the only real substantive change here is that we removed a policy that deals with the county's budget, and it requires the maintenance of a maximum debt to revenue ratio of 25%. That's really not a typical comprehensive plan item, and it just doesn't. We don't think we need that here, so we went ahead and struck that from this draft.
Okay.
You want a motion to that?
Yes.
I make a motion that we remove that policy from the plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. You know, I didn't take public comment on that last one. I didn't take.
Yeah, and on this one, if we can approve the draft language.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be part of the motion, the
Yeah,
draft language.
that'd be
Is there anybody who wishes to address this item or the last one we just approved? I think I forgot, so.
You gonna mess up our
Matthews,
party?
I'm a resident of Walton County. On the last one, it wasn't clear from the vote nor from what's on the screen to remove the sidewalk requirement from the comp plan and to put it in the LDC. If that was part of the motion, then I'm in support. I'm all about getting rid of stuff that doesn't need to be in the comp plan, put it in the LDC. But that wasn't clear from the motion. That was my own.
I think that's what the motion was.
That's what you said, I believe. That's what I said.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comments on that. All in favor of the current motion, say aye.
Do you need public comments on this one too? Or did you already ask?
I asked for it. Nobody wants to talk. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, and lastly, we have infrastructure. We have this element's broken into sub-elements. So you have in your packet here tonight potable water, solid waste, drainage, and we combined the aquifer recharge element with the potable water element. The only policy issue here that I would need direction on you guys is there is a policy in the drainage sub-element dealing with stormwater utility. It doesn't have a date certain, but it's not something we've done, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in the next presentation about single-family stormwater. But we can either extend that, leave it in and extend it to some future date, or delete it, because it's just one of those things that's hanging out there.
What's the best way to do it, in your opinion?
My recommendation would be to extend it, to leave it in and extend it for now. You may want to hear the discussion that we have coming up next, and then come back to this with the single-family stormwater. It's really a policy issue. If it just says that we're going to initiate a study on a stormwater utility, so if that's something we think we might want to do, we would want to maybe do it. I mean, we certainly don't have the staff or timing to do it this year. It would need to be something that we put some kind of extended date on.
How long has this been in been in the plan?
Probably, I don't know, probably since the beginning, it's one
And
of
it's
those
never
things.
been done?
No, so, I mean, that's a good indication, maybe you should delete it, right, but 2011, okay, so
2011.
not too long.
How long would you want to extend it for? What would be that recommendation?
We would at least need, a year or two staff up and a year to study, so
10 years?
you're looking at 2 years, yeah.
How about we go 3 and I give you a little play?
Okay.
I make a motion, we extend it for 3 years.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Let's make sure everybody understands what the motion's about. What specifically it's doing.
And you are recommending approval of the draft language with the change to the stormwater utility policy to extend 3 years.
Everybody understand that? Okay. Everybody up here understands it though, right? Anybody wish to make comment on that? Seeing none, we'll close it. Commissioners, what's your pleasure? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, that's it. And we're almost done with the comp plan. Get ready for the LDC, probably coming to you in March.
I think I'm not gonna be here in March. All right, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. So this next item is a discussion regarding single-family residential stormwater. At the end of 2016, the county adopted stormwater ordinance which required regulation of single-family lots that were not part of communities with a master stormwater plan. So we're 2 years into this. It's given us an opportunity to look at that, what those regulations were, how it's actually being implemented, and some of the some improvements that we think we can make to not only improve the standards that are there, but also to make it a little bit more palatable and achievable for the property owners to meet those regulations. What we're not doing is changing any standards to our development order projects, so major, minor, less than minor. We're not recommending any changes to that. That would still be what's regulated by Chapter 5. We're not suggesting that we eliminate any standards for single-family homes. And none of these changes will be would amend what's required in the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone properties. So I just want to be clear, because those are some questions that we've gotten. But this is strictly going to handle single-family lots that are south of the bay, that are not in communities that have a master stormwater plan, which is the same requirement that was adopted in 2016. So the current options for these properties are they have a maximum impervious surface ratio of 40%. The structure has to be built on pilings or pier supported. And the intent of that was to raise the structure off the ground to allow for historic flow of stormwater to continue across that property, and that the fill material and grading is limited to the minimum necessary for access and or garage carport. So you have that option. If you cannot meet those requirements, your only other option is to meet the same standard that our major development orders have to meet, the same requirements that are in Chapter 5. That requires a full geotechnical analysis of the site, as well as the other volume and quantity and quality requirements that they have to meet. Some of those issues, we ran into issues with small lots, properties that have environmental constraints. It became difficult for them to meet that high of a standard. So in some of the implementation issues that we had were some potential regulatory conflicts between our stormwater requirements and the Florida Building Code and how it'll affect foundations. So we wanted to clean that up a little bit. I mentioned the natural constraints. We've got some small lots that have either wetland areas or preservation requirements, and we'll show a couple of examples on that. And then the constructability of these systems on these properties, as well as the future maintenance requirements that they handle, that our current ordinance does not address at all. On the county side, some of the issues that we had in implementing was we saw a real bottleneck in our permitting process, not only because the applicants were trying to figure out how to submit plans to comply. Staff was also trying to figure out, okay, what do these regulations actually mean? How do we get these? What do the plans need to see and show? We were probably understaffed when that requirement came in. So we've done a lot of work internally. We've brought in some more staff, more in-house engineers. We have a third-party engineering firm that we've contracted with to help review these stormwater plans. So we've made some changes that we think have improved the review process, but now we want to make or suggest some changes to the actual ordinance that we can improve the other side of the table, if you will. So this is an example of the type of stormwater plans that we're seeing. What's highlighted there in the yellow or green is an exfiltration system, which is a stormwater system that's underground. Highlighted in red is the actual building foundation itself, and so there's real close proximity to an underground stormwater system to the foundation itself. And if you look, if you could go to the next slide, this is a picture of what that system is proposing to be underground. It's nearly a 3-foot trunk that's going to be surrounding the foundation of that house. And so there was concerns with how is that going to be maintained? How is that going to be, if something ever went wrong with it, how are we going to get in there to actually to repair that? And so it just shows to some of the constraints that these properties have, that the standard that we're required to meet is where there's some discrepancies. The next slide is another example of a small lot where with this they decided to go with a retention pond or area, a dry retention pond, but it's essentially everything outside the building footprint is a retention swale on something like this. And so those are some of the plans that we're seeing that don't seem to be as realistic in real life when they actually go in and put those in versus what they look like on paper. You just imagine that pond right there is a foot deep. So if you could just picture stepping out the back door into a 1 foot deep swale that surrounds the property. So,
and did I understand correctly that there's no mechanism to I guess enforce that? In other words,
well, yeah. So right now, there's nothing in the code that requires any sort of maintenance agreement or acknowledgement, and so the current owner understands that he had to pay an engineer to design this and paid the money to put it in. But he sells the house, and 2 years later, the next owner looks out his window and realizes there's a hole and fills in the lot. There's no requirement or inspection or maintenance step, and we feel that that's a break in the cycle. That's one of the alternatives that we're suggesting. The next slide is one of the properties that just has preservation surrounding it. So their development area of their property is constrained just because of the natural conditions there. So it's just these are different types of lots that, with the stormwater ordinance, kind of more of a broad brush that we're seeing where property owners and engineers and contractors are having difficulty meeting all of these standards with the type of options that are there in Chapter 5 currently. So the next slide, these are actual pictures of exfiltration systems here in Walton County. These are, I will preface, these are not residential systems, but it's the same type of system that we're seeing proposed on residential lots. There's a lot of work that goes in to put these in, and there's a lot of the industry standard is that these systems have to be replaced or maintained within every 5 to 10 years.
How much does that system cost?
Some of the underground systems we're seeing upwards of $30,000 to put in. Those are some of the estimates that we've been told from engineers, from homeowners, and so it's just we're not sure if this is what was intended to be the stormwater solution. So we just wanted to highlight some of those this evening. So what we're proposing. There's kind of a few here. Alternative one, which is what Kristen had mentioned earlier, taking a regional approach and making some of these improvements as capital improvements rather than lot-by-lot stormwater systems. We think a way to do that is through the stormwater utility. Like Kristen said, there's language already in our comp plan to support that idea. It just hasn't been explored yet. So it's more of a long-range solution, but we think it's a valid one to at least discuss, and so that's what we want to just mention at the front end. The other alternatives that we're going to go through are things that we think we can do immediately, changes that we can make to the code that would bring an immediate relief to property owners. The first are expanding some of our best management practices. Earlier, when I mentioned the 40% maximum building on piles and piers. Those are best management practices that were implemented in that ordinance. We think if we can expand those a little bit, give a little bit more flexibility to those options, and also include some low-impact development to go along with that. The next is to include a de minimis exemption. This would be specifically for large lots. There are a handful of them out there where their overall impact to the property is minimal. We're seeing somewhere around even 10 to 20% impervious surface. And so giving an exemption that if you were under a certain percentage, no matter what you built, because that impact is so minimal, that they not have to meet any sort of stormwater plan requirement management system. The other for small lots, or small changes I should say, would cover existing developed lots that didn't meet their maximum impervious surface, but they want to do a small addition, that there would be a square footage or a percentage that we would allow to, 200 square feet to add a porch, a screen porch, or to add a bathroom, because those are reviews that we get. One of them was a 70 square foot addition to add a bathroom to their house. It was the existing house was on slab, and so the code requires that they have an engineer design master stormwater plan to handle a 70 square foot.
Where do these standards apply in the county? Is it countywide or?
No, these are just the properties south of the bay that are not in a subdivision that have a master stormwater plan.
They don't apply to Freeport either?
No, sir. Everything north of the bay, there's no, unless let me back up. Unless they're in a community that has a master stormwater plan.
But just a
regular. But if a
lot.
regular lot of record that's out there, they don't have to provide any sort of stormwater design to us to review in the construction of their property. And then the last is to develop a technical manual that would give us the opportunity to put more detail and kind of dig into the details a little bit more, rather than putting that in the land development code. That would be a manual that we can produce and amend and fluctuate as needed as the market changes. So that's some of the idea behind the technical manual is to provide a little bit more detail and parameters to property owners, that they could look at some of the parameters or the calculations that we would develop, and they could possibly use those rather than having to hire a professional engineer to design a stormwater system, that we would put in some default that they could fall to. It would be a simplified requirement calculation, simplified sizing calculations, and that we could put in there. We think that we could provide some relief rather than having to have a full geotechnical analysis for a single lot. That they could do that by a hand auger and do that soil sampling. It'd be a lot less. That in and of itself adds anywhere from $1,800 to $3,500, just having to hire an engineer to do that analysis. So
You're trying to take money out of the small businessman's hand, the engineers, right?
Well, we think that we can do it more efficiently and benefit the property
I
owner.
think it makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, so it's a, when we get a geotechnical analysis for a single lot, I mean, it's very complicated and there's a lot of detail in there that's not necessary for what they're trying to do. So we think that we can address that in the technical manual, rather than that high standard that our development projects are having to meet.
Which would save the citizen.
Save the homeowner a lot.
It'll save the homeowner, and it'll also save us review time as well. I think it makes the whole review process from beginning to end more efficient.
What's the, if you know this, what's the average length of time for a building permit on one of these lots to be approved?
So when we started, and this is where we're going to get real here. When we started, we were all trying to figure this out. The first reviews were kind of being permitted without much of an in-house review, simply because we didn't have the engineering staff to review them. So a lot of those kind of just went through. Once we started figuring out, okay, there's a lot more complexity to this, when we started tightening down on that, those reviews began to drag out, simply the stormwater part of it. Everything else was reviewed and ready to go as far as, setbacks and parking and all that stuff. But some of the stormwater reviews were taking as long as 3 months to get through that process. Currently, where we're at, because we've improved our staffing, we have the expedited option where they can pay to go out to that third-party review firm. Those reviews are now cut down to a couple of weeks. So we've made some drastic improvements in the efficiency of that review time, but it's a lot of pressure on that whole process right now because of all of these. We think we can relieve some of that pressure and get those times even tighter.
How much?
If I could, Matt Carver for the Planning Department, if I could provide just a little bit of further explanation. When we first started this process, when these new single-family rules were put in place, we didn't have the staff to review this, so we chose to allow the engineer to certify that it was constructed consistent with the requirements in the code. They signed and sealed it, we accepted it and put it in the file. They went and built it, hopefully. We quickly figured out that even though it was signed and sealed by an engineer, it may not have been something that we thought was adequate or even got anywhere near the code.
Or built.
So we realized that we had to have much more scrutiny on these stormwater plans. So we had to engage higher engineers, add additional staff training, just to overcome that problem of just taking somebody's word for it, even though it's signed and sealed. They may not be doing that kind of thing, even though they have a sign and a seal. We had lots of structural engineers doing stormwater just as a convenience to their structural client, and we got systems designed that we don't think would work or would be appropriate for a homeowner to have in their yard. So that's part of that transition. Once we started really reviewing these things, because of the quality of what we were reviewing, it was taking much longer. People were going back and having to resubmit, and we had a few that we figured they would never ever get one submittal that was going to be approvable.
How much does this cost your department, one of these reviews?
Well,
Ballpark.
we were initially charging $65 for that review, figuring that based on the quality of engineering that we were getting in the development order application, we would be having people that certainly were qualified to do this work in Florida, but were experienced in Walton County and experienced in our code. We quickly, and that's how we priced that. If we had gotten that, $65 would have probably paid for the review because everything would have been ready to go and there would have been no resubmittal. That just did not bear itself out in reality. In order to expedite this process and deal with the backload and the amount of time it was taking to get through the process, we got the BCC to authorize us to contract out with Dewberry to outsource these reviews as a way to try to speed it up. Now, to step out into the express lane rather than go through the $65 lane costs $500. Now, the other thing that we attempted to address in that was back in the old days, we had development order agents that would give us sort of half of a plan and then ask for us to write or mark it up and provide comments, and then they'd go back and then fix their plan so it would get to the thing. We would much rather deal with engineers that know what they're doing and give us everything on the front end so there's no need for a resubmittal. And we're going to have minor changes for resubmittals, but when we instituted the outsourced engineering review of these stormwater plans, we implemented a process where $500, and it's generally going to be back to you within 14 days rather than 3 months.
And it's going to be right.
And people are paying $3,000 and $4,000, $10,000 a month in interest carrying this lot and this construction loan, and that was a small amount of money. However, in order to make sure that the same thing wasn't going to happen with our outsourced engineer, which would only stretch out that 2-week period of 3 months, we implemented a policy where you pay the $500 one time, that gets you your initial review, and that gets you one resubmittal. If it takes a third resubmittal based on the review of your second resubmittal, then that's another $500. So it gets expenses very quickly in the outsourced realm, and that's been an effective tool to make sure that people do their homework before they submit and they give us something that's approvable. I'll let you continue.
One of the other indirect effects of that was that the backlog that we saw in the in-house reviews got cleared up. The more people that go to the expedited, it also clears up and expedites the in-house. So we're seeing an overall improvement on the efficiencies of that. We're also seeing somewhat of an improvement on the quality of the submittals as well, as that they have to write that second $500 check. All of them are starting to improve their plans on the initial submittal. So the next is just just want to hit some of the high points, and if you can actually go to the next slide. These are just some options of more of the low impact development techniques that we think we can use. And just real briefly, that's a rain garden. That's essentially it's a swale, a glorified swale, but it looks a whole lot better than a ditch out front. The next slide is a rain barrel. We've seen some of those here around. I know the building industry did a project just last year with the schools where they donated a bunch of rain barrels and had the students paint them and then turn around and auction them off. And so those are being used today. The next is these are a pervious paver. We get a lot of questions about pavers and if they get credit for a pervious paver, which there's a lot of detail that goes into that, but it's an option that we think that we can address in the technical manual to give credit for that as well, rather than just a concrete driveway. That's a dry well. On the surface, it looks pretty simple, but there's a whole system that goes into it to help. It's similar to an exfiltration system, except you can see it from the top, but it's a whole lot easier to maintain than that large system that we showed earlier. This is a vegetative buffer, which helps with water quality, especially when you're along a water body. And so those are things that our code indirectly already has when we have those buffers, the shoreline buffers, and so we think they can be utilized for that. So just in wrapping that up, we recommend a combination of all four of the alternatives that we just hit on. Number one being the discussion about a stormwater utility, a long-term goal for some of the more complicated stormwater issues that we have in the south end of the county. We think that's a more realistic approach to it rather than the single lot-by-lot stormwater designs. But then the immediate alternatives, the big one is the de minimis exemption. We think a lot of people would see immediate relief with that. The expanded or better designed best management practices and low impact development techniques, and then the implementation of the technical manual to help assist our customers, our citizens go through this process and use, rather than just trying to figure out the land development code the way it's written.
Have you got an estimate on how much this potentially could save the average citizen?
Well, if they don't have to hire an engineer at all to design, I'm sure there's engineers in the audience that could give us a better number. But some of the prices that we've heard range from $5,000 to $10,000 to design a stormwater plant, plus the implementation cost of putting it in. So I mean that we think there's a significant amount of saving, not only monetarily but also the time that it takes for them to hire an engineer,
debt service,
for them to go in there and do the design. That adds several weeks to their process before they even come to us. So we think we can save on the cost as well as the time through there by implementing these.
And you would recommend all 4 options?
We think the options 2 through 3, which there's draft language here, which came late, so we know we're not asking you guys to approve this right now. We think what we'd like is to come back at the next meeting, give you guys time to review all this, provide any input that you may have, or ask any questions. But all of the alternatives 2 through 4 are incorporated into the draft language. Alternative 1, which is the stormwater utility, I think we like the idea. We think that there's potential there, but we believe we would be in favor of a discussion about it, a serious.
The latest updates that you have, are they in our package or is that separate?
Yeah, just real brief what we have in here.
I'm just asking because if you want us to review it over the next month, that's great, but we need to make sure we're looking at the right thing.
Everything other than the technical manual is
in here.
There's reference to the technical manual in this language, which essentially would give the framework for it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that we would ask is maybe direction in support of us actually drafting the technical manual. That's going to take a lot of time and effort of staff, and so before we went.
What kind of direction you want from us on that?
If you are in favor of that.
I think it's a great idea.
Do you want a motion?
Do we want a motion
No.
in support of that, or are we good?
Or do you just want direction?
Direction, I think at this point would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea to do.
Okay.
I think it'll save everybody some time and money.
Right. And that's what our goal is, to make this process
So at this point, you want us to just review this?
Yeah, so the biggest change would be the actual
meeting.
language change. There's some formatting change, but there's also an addition to the land development code. These are what the amendments are. In there, you're going to see the de minimis exemption that we want to write into the land development code itself. One of the other things that I do want to hit that's not really a change that would be in the technical manual, but it's a requirement that we think as another component that we're missing, is requiring an as-built survey at the end of the project. Right now, they're required to provide a foundation survey once their foundation's poured, so we verify that it's built in the right place. But the parts that we're missing are all the final grading that goes in. The stormwater system's not in place at that stage, and so we think that an as-built survey prior to their CO inspection is a component that would be very beneficial for us to ensure that what was approved to go in is actually being put in place. And then there's a record that we have, so for the maintenance component, we know exactly what that plan's supposed to look like, what it looked like on day one. So that's the only thing that I didn't hit on that I just wanted to point out.
Matt, let me ask you, is there a way that we could get what we're being asked to look at for next month? Maybe email to us just in a separate package that we could take that and have time to review it?
Yes, sir.
And the reason I ask that is because trying to look through this to find what we're supposed to find might be a little bit more complicated. It'd be a lot easier just to have a package of what we're reviewing.
We can certainly send you something that's more directed.
That would be good.
We'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Is that it?
And that's it for me. If you have any specific questions on the technical manual, Rita is available. I don't know if you want to hit on any of that. Yeah, I think she just, Rita's one of our in-house engineers. So she's the brain behind all of it.
Good evening. As Jason mentioned, the technical manual is something that we are proposing to start working on. We have some ideas if you have any questions on something that doesn't exist just yet.
I don't know how we can question something you don't have.
Yes, briefly, we would like to provide simplified calculations for the requirements. So contractors, homeowners can figure out what they need to provide, and examples of structures that Jason was showing, how to size, how to maintain, so they can pick and choose what best fits their lot, their lifestyle, and just more explanation on things that we can't fit in the land development code, and
This
some
is something that would be
exemptions.
available online and in hard form here in the office?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Written in layman's terms?
Yes.
That even somebody like me could understand?
Yes.
God bless you.
It'd have to get pretty simple then.
It'd have to get pretty
Yes.
simple.
That's the goal.
I think I think the idea is great. And I think that the more information you can put out there to, not only to just citizens, but to developers, to where they know what they need before they come in, I think it makes the process run better.
Yes, that's the goal. That's what we would like to accomplish.
Sounds like a plan.
I like that idea.
You want to say public comments for when we're going to vote on it?
Yeah, we'll save public comments. We're not going to have public comments on this. We're not taking any action, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes,
Quasi-judicial now. We got to swear. them in.
that concludes legislative, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we need to swear in anybody on QJ.
Anybody that anticipates testifying on any of these
On-
items that are upcoming?
Go ahead.
Chair,
Did-
do you want- Anybody that anticipates testifying on any of these quasi-judicial items that are upcoming, please rise, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? When you approach the podium, please state your name, spell your last name for the record, and indicate whether you have been sworn. Any of the commissioners up here, have y'all had any communication with anyone that would prevent you from rendering a fair and impartial decision on any of these matters?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mac, we do have a couple who wanted to comment on that last thing, so we'll go back to. You want to comment on what we just spoke about?
The stormwater plan.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
So I just wanted to touch on that stormwater plan that's being proposed. The de minimis part of it, okay? I'm a homeowner and I'm trying to put a 338 square foot extra piece of a patio. And as it's written right now, I have to have an engineer come out, it's $6,000.
Really?
Not including, $6,000 to have them come out and do the stormwater management plan, not including what it's gonna cost to have it actually put in place.
Right.
For just adding 338 square feet of a
So you think this is a
patio.
good idea then?
I think it's a great idea. Personally, I'd like to see, I don't know how the whole thing works, but the de minimis part of it be approved sooner than the 2 or 3 months that we go down the road. I've been dealing with this since December now, and it's just to the point to where it's like, it doesn't make any sense that I'm just adding onto a house. Now, somebody who's building a house, that's a whole nother ballgame. I mean, you're talking massive area that's being
Right.
taken up.
Right.
But to do a small, tiny structure and spend that kind of money,
I mean, it's crazy.
it's actually more money than it is the actual structure.
Yeah, I believe you. But I don't think there's anything we can do at this point to address that. I wish we could.
Mac, is there any way to do it, just that part of it sooner, tonight? Help this
All
gentleman?
of it still requires an amendment to the Land Development Code, which means it's processed as a legislative item through the Board of County Commissioners. At the Board of County Commissioners, we have to have 2 separate hearings. They have to be at least 10 days apart.
Yeah, it's going to take time.
We're proposing to bring this back next month on February 8th for your recommendation. We would very probably like to take it to February 13th for the first reading at the BCC, and then at their pleasure, they would schedule the second reading.
Right.
Either at the next meeting or the meeting following that, the first meeting in March.
Yeah, there's just not a whole lot of ways we can speed that up.
We're trying to-
Maybe slow down your addition.
It's sitting there with nothing, that I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But the wording for 10%, I think needs to stay, if that can be put on
Okay.
there somehow.
Okay.
We appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Clay Bowman, I just wanted to clarify my understanding about this. In here it says that you're supposed to build on piles because it allows the ground to remain pervious for water. So these storm drainage designs are for homes that have concrete slabs? Because if your house is built on piles, then why would you need a storm management system? Yes? No?
I think there's a misunderstanding there somewhere.
That's why I'm trying to clarify
Yeah.
my understanding of this, because it says something about deleting 50712, which is where it says you're supposed to build on piles.
We're not deleting that. That's a option, a BMP option, and that's staying in. There's no change. And if you do that option, you do not need a stormwater plan.
Right, if you build on piles.
That's right.
Right, okay, so all these stormwater plans are for homes that want to build on concrete?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so why don't you just tell people that they can't build on concrete slabs, which was the original intention on this land because concrete is so bad
Okay.
for the ground? And then you made it legal, not you, somebody in the past made it legal so long as they paid the $500 to do it. So anyways, this is just...
Those are questions that I cannot answer for
Okay,
you. I'm
well, I
sorry.
was just trying to clarify my understanding, which
Okay.
she did for me, so thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on. Item number 6.
Yes, Commissioners, this is Beachside Estates subdivision request approved by final order. Bob Barante's reviewed this, and and this is also the settlement replacement project for the Azuro condominium. I'll let Bob introduce it. Thank you.
Well, since Max stole my wind, I will go over this quickly. It's 6 units on 4 lots. As you may recognize when going through the history, this, as Max said, this was the Azuro project that was recommended approval by you and approved by the board. Some affected neighbors and the applicant entered in mitigation. This is what came out of the mitigation, so they're back getting the DO. Our process has been compressed because of the agreement. We went this month to TRC. We're here tonight to get your feedback on it, and then it is scheduled for the second BCC meeting of this month to keep in line with that agreement. I just want to point out a few things. That the portion of fair share of this amount of this project will be $11,400, and that no compatibility analysis was required because this project's density is below the minimum allowable density of 2 units per acre. So without any further time, unless any of you have questions for me, I will turn it over to Dean and Dana and his team, and they will quickly go over the project for you.
Commissioners, have any questions for staff at this time? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, Dana Matthews representing the applicant. With me is Steve Tatum, paralegal in our office, and Dean Burgess, civil engineer, project engineer. I won't go through the whole history other than the fact that you all know that PC back in 07 voted unanimously to approve a 26-unit condo project on this 3.11 acres. Subsequently got approved by the BCC at 13 units. Never got built. DO expired. New developer comes in, and that's us. And you remember all the buttons, stop Azuro. And we've had these contested meetings before you and as well as the BCC. Finally got approved. 6-1 vote by y'all, and then a 3-2 vote by the county commissioners to approve Azuro as a 12-unit condo project as submitted with a couple conditions. Got sued by our neighbors, people that live in this house right here. No surprise. They were represented by Will Dunaway, if you remember, during the meetings. And then the Wires who live down this road over here. So we get in litigation and we wrangle around a little bit. We decide that we're going to go to a mediation. County's involved. Sidney Noyes appeared for the county, as well as Larry Jones and Mac and Bob. Our team, all the Warners, the Dwyer, and their lawyers. And we settled this thing on November 30th. And part of the settlement is throw out the condo and bring in the single-family homes, which is what everybody wanted to begin with. So it's really that simple. And so instead of this, which is what's been approved, doesn't have the comprehensive plan and land development code, you're gonna end up with these 4 lots right here, and 2 of these lots, we from single family, and either single family or the option for the developer to do duplexes, which looks like a home, but there's actually 2 entrances. As you know, we went through this at the last hearing. There's duplexes throughout. This is the type of work and the type of homes that are going to be contemplated to be built there. We're talking about high end. Of course, you know the property is on the go. The reason why there's no compatibility report is neighborhood infill, 8 units an acre. We were at, I think, 3.86 units an acre before when we got approved. This brings it down to 1.93. And that's if we did 6 units. If we do 5 units, it even drops down below that. County accepted the geotech reports and some of the other things. We had to redo all the engineering, all the site plan. So we've been through all the technical review that's required under the county. They wanted us to go through the major development order application process again. And so that's why we went through TRC. We're here before you. And we're hoping that you will approve this. I noticed that staff report, which I moved to introduce in evidence as our Exhibit 1, and then I have the settlement agreement that was executed that day on November 30th. It was subsequently, of course, the county attorney cannot execute a settlement agreement on behalf of the county. It has to have approval by the board. So we agreed as part of the settlement agreement to go to the board on December 12th. And they did, and the board approved this settlement agreement. So this will be our Exhibit 2. And other than that, we're here to answer any questions you may have. As of this morning, there was no public comments or letters or emails or phone calls to Mr. Bronny about this project. And you remember there was 75 to 100 people here for all the other meetings. So I'm hoping that the neighborhood now likes our new plan.
Let me ask you a question real quick.
Yes, sir.
Matthews. Between the difference between this plan and the Azura, these single-family residences, how many bedrooms are they going to be?
5.
How many people?
4 to 5.
4 to 5.
Times 4 or 5.
Anywhere from 4 to 6 units.
Yeah, but you would expect big homes on something lots
Oh,
like
it
this,
has to
because these are big lots,
These
these
are-
are Gulfront
You're
lots.
talking about lots that are probably going to sell for about $2.5 million a piece.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just surprised y'all got this figured out in mediation.
Believe me, when you always make the phone call, this is a short story, so you'll appreciate this, hearing what happens when you all approve things and we get into litigation over the, 2 lawsuits. One petition for writ of cert, another one, what they call it, 3215 challenge to the comp plan. So the first thing you do when you talk to your client and tell them it's going to be 18 months and it's going to be a lot of money and the uncertainty on what happens in litigation, you say, look, I'd be remiss if I didn't call the other side and at least ask them, what is it? I know you hate our plan, but is there anything about our plan that you might want to see changed so I can pass it on to my client? And Mr. Dunaway said, Dana, he said, if you're going to build a condo there, he said, we ain't got nothing to talk about. No, he said, unless you're going to build single-family homes, we ain't got anything to talk about. I said, that ain't going to happen. So I called my client and tell him about it. And about a week or 2 later, my client said, well, I might consider that. I mean, I was just floored. And so we literally went on a rocket docket to get a mediator, get it all set up, and then work with Dean. And we had pre-op meetings with the county even before mediation. We want to make sure that we're designing something that would be acceptable to the county, that would meet all their code requirements. These things happen. I mean,
Plus prices have gotten up there a lot more too, so.
yeah, hey, right now we got a market that, we'd rather be building than litigating, so.
Yeah.
You probably can't answer this, but in those 5 bedrooms, how many people will that house sleep?
I don't know, I have no idea. Okay. We haven't gotten.
It's going to turn into what's down the street from it, and the 29 people stay in there with 15 cars with no place to park.
Assuming they're rentals, You're assuming that.
Yeah.
I mean, today's prices on these lots and what it's gonna cost for per square foot to build homes on these lots are probably gonna put it out of a short-term rental. But as I told you at the last meeting,
Right, I
I
understand.
can't make any promises one way.
As long as they agree to it, I guess it's good.
One of the things that you stressed in the last meeting was about preserving the dunes. What's the difference in the first project?
Oh, yeah, good question. So your preservation area is, remember, was 96.15%, I think.
Very high.
Preserved is still roughly the same, right? We're, point oh something. 3.0% due impact. Yeah, so basically, all the primary dunes that we talked about, none of that's changing. And the other thing that the way we designed this thing, just so you know, that made the Warners happy, we knew we'd have to do that, is we created a 35-foot corridor. So theirs is a two-story house. So now, they don't have to look at the back of the condo building, they don't even have to look at the back of the house. So we created that view corridor for them, and other than that, this whole area is still preserved in this house when we built on it. We drew, as you know, you're not required to put in, necessarily what a footprint is gonna be of a home on a lot, nor a pool or anything else.
Right.
We did it because we knew that we could never get anything settled unless they saw exactly what we were gonna put, and where we were gonna put it, and how the situs was on the lot, and the distances, setback, all that kind of stuff. These areas right down here are actually pool areas and decking. So we wanted to show exactly what it would look like, at least potentially, on a build out.
If I remember right, there was a county access.
Yes, sir.
And that's been maintained?
Yes, sir. It's right here, same thing, runs right down here. Not being impacted, again, we're just crossing it by creating the road.
And there's still no parking associated with that?
Yes, sir. No, yeah, now, matter of fact, there's no parking underneath the condo building. Everybody got parked. You know, the way these are all designed is to have parking garages underneath, enclosed within each of these homes, as well as to have parking if needed on their driveway.
But, I mean, there's no parking associated with that access. It's a neighborhood access.
No. This is the road that currently exists within the county, was it 66 foot altogether? And 33 of it's on our property. We're not changing, we're not interfering with the counties. The county want to come in here and build a parking lot. I mean, I guess that'd be the county's prerogative at some time in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anybody else have any questions?
Pardon me, Chair. For the record, does the board accept applicants Exhibit 1 and 2 into
Accepted.
evidence?
Actually, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Who was the mediator?
Bill Bond. No, we use Steve Bauman. Steve Bauman over at Fort Walton, the lawyer.
Okay. We had nobody sign up. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comments. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're gonna take about 10 minutes before we go to the next one.
Next item is.
Mac, we're gonna take about 10.
Okay.
I went to Troy. I'm proud.
I did too for a year, play football over there. And I transferred to Auburn.
You know, Steve. I didn't play anything but the Standard Oil Company. I played that.
Oh, I was Standard Chemical. I did. I was there when it burned. Not in there, but I watched it. I mean, you could see that thing burning from up there. I graduated high school in 80, so putting some fights in there. Some guy knocked it out.
Jerry, you
I
ready?
don't know if he cut somebody. We were. I didn't have anything to do with it. So.
Okay, we are back in session.
So you were there when I was there.
Hi, I'm Bob Baranti. I have been sworn. The next project is the Southern. This is a major development order application submitted by Jenkins Engineering Incorporated on behalf of Walton County Holdings, LLC, requesting approval to construct a new apartment complex with 88 units and common space and a 1,000 square foot office space. The project is located on J.D. Miller Road. The proposed parcel is west of Frito Lane and on 9.77 plus or minus acres with a future land use of Town Center 1. This project has no outstanding comments. There's been no activity on this parcel previously to this application. The traffic concurrency, they asked them to revise the traffic concurrency, and they have, and we've gotten additional comments if I remember correctly.
You know what that was?
Yeah, yes, sir. I believe it was.
Well,
I don't remember getting any comments recently, Bob.
Okay. Well, this was in your comments for TRC.
Oh, for TRC,
Yeah.
we've already addressed it.
Yes. Yes. So.
Did it meet capacity?
Yes.
And so we'd like to make a motion after the applicant to either approve or deny this Southern Major Development Order and the typical approve. Now this condition of improvements, there are things that may be a little bit time lengthwise, that requirement. They'll have to get with FEMA for a letter of map change. But these will all be conditions of approval of the development order that will have to be done before the development order becomes in effect. So if you don't have any more questions on me, I will turn it over to the applicant, and the applicant can go over the project.
Do we need to accept the staff report?
Yes, I'd like you to. Yeah.
Accept.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jamie Eubanks, EUBANKS with Jenkins Engineering, and I have been sworn in. I think Bob hit kind of the high points of the project, but there's just a few things that I want to mention because I think they are important to the Town Center 1 master plan, which this is a part of. This does have a pedestrian trail that goes from J.D. Miller Road back to the rear of the site. And actually at the rear of the site, they are dedicating a 1.21 acre community park. Gazebos, picnic tables, charcoal grills, whatever ultimately may be. So I do think that's worth mentioning. Also, 4.22 acres of wetlands on this particular piece of property. They're actually only impacting 11% of those, so they have gone out of their way to maintain and conserve as much of the natural land as they can. Just a few of the other high points. We do meet the stormwater requirements, of course, up to 100 year without overtopping. And then as Bob mentioned with the FEMA, the flood zone requirements, they have actually hired a consultant that does this full-time out of Jacksonville, Gemini Engineering. And their analysis shows that actually none of the developed portion of the site will end up being within the flood zone. So now they will have to go, of course, through FEMA to make that physical change of the map, but that is what their analysis have shown. Beyond that, obviously, I'll be happy to take any questions.
This is 4 buildings?
Correct.
How many stories?
3.
And there's 88 apartments?
That is correct.
And so how many bedrooms?
It's split evenly between 1 and 2.
Is this sort of designed to be workforce style house? I mean, what's the price range? What are y'all looking at? What's your target audience? How about that?
Probably the developer can answer that one better than me.
Is he?
He is here. Blake, do you want to address that?
My name is Blake Ritchie, and with Walton County Holdings, I have not been sworn in.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What's your target audience?
Workforce housing.
So, and that fits in with the town center?
Yes, sir.
You have any ballpark about price ranges? Let me back up. Are you planning on retaining all the ownership of these, or are you going to sell them? How is that going to?
Retain ownership. That's what we're in the business of.
So
we've got several other apartment complexes in other towns, and we own them and manage them ourselves.
And what's your price ballpark? You don't have to.
I would like to think between $1,000 and $1,200 a month for the ones and it's split evenly between 1s and 2s.
Yeah. Is there any amenities? He mentioned the park. Is there any other amenities with this? Is there?
There's a pool.
There's a pool.
There's a pool and a small clubhouse area within the office. The
Gonna
1,000
have
square foot office we have.
gated access or?
No plans for that.
You did say you were managing yourself
Yes.
on site?
Yeah, we own and manage ourselves on site.
On site, man.
Yes.
Anything else for the developer?
What was the name of your company?
Walton County Holdings. We're calling the project the Southern.
Like Walton County?
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicants at all? Seeing none, we'll open up public comments. Ivan Harstead? You have to forgive me on that name pronunciation, sir. Okay.
Harst, V as in Victor, E, D as in David, T.
Were you sworn in, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
My name is Ivan Harstvet, and I have the property that's directly behind, and I don't know it. I don't have any objections to what they're going to do. I have a concern as y'all, or as development occurs along J.D. Miller Road, it seems like more and more of the floodwaters that, you know, when we get a bad deluge, gets more and more diverted to the back of my property. I own 7 acres directly west of this development. So my concern would be, is this going to push more water onto me, or is
What's
it
going to
be
happen to the
about
drainage
same?
of the stormwater on that property?
Right. On the back of this property and across the back of my property is what I grew up known as Gurkey Creek. It goes, it's a swamp basically, but it goes and meanders all the way to the bay. Back when I was a child, I was raised on this property. I was born here, and we've owned the property since '64, and I was raised on that 20 acres. When I was a child, mosquito control would come down and with a drag line, and they'd dig it out to the bay. And so, you know, we get a bad rain, most of it would run out pretty good. Over time, I guess they don't do that anymore, and it's filled in and growed up, and so we get a bad rain sometimes. And
Until the water flowing out, it just stands.
yeah, it stands for a lot longer, and eventually it'll drain down. But it seems like more and more water is being forced across the back of our, what used to be 20 acres. I own 7 of it now. And
So
I don't know what the county's, if the county is proposing anything, or I don't know that they're responsible for it. It's just a concern of mine. I noticed, you know, they're building a housing development on one side. They're doing this development, or they're proposing this development on down from it. As they put more and more development in there, it seems like the water has fewer and fewer places to go. It's kind of being funneled.
We'll ask the developer to address that and see what he's come up with.
And that, like I said, I have no,
yeah.
I don't see that I have would have a legal reason to oppose it, even if I did, and I don't really.
Yeah.
You know, it's their
Just concerned about where the water's going to go.
Exactly.
I understand.
Thank you.
Mr. Eubanks, you?
Happy to address it. Let me grab the board. So actually, in this particular case, by design, quite frankly, as I mentioned earlier, the wetlands that they are maintaining on site. So actually, everything on this site, there will be nothing impervious on the rear of this site, the rear half of this site. So the front 4 acres approximately is where all the development is. Our stormwater area, I'll go ahead and just draw on it. You can't see it on this plan, but our stormwater area is in the front half of the site, and they have left the entirety of the wetlands in the rear of the site. protected. Those are not to be used.
So
And
any
it-
runoff from the developed portion will be maintained where you just drew that little?
That is
Can
correct.
Mr. Harstevet come up here and see?
Yeah, come on up here and take a look at that.
Absolutely. So everything from this portion will go to a detention pond at this area, and all these wetlands will remain unimpacted.
Okay. I think he wanted you to impact them, maybe clean them out.
I don't know what they base that on, but,
No, it's engineering studies
you
and,
know.
It is, and
When we
unfortunately,
get a good rain,
yeah.
Before you lose that map.
when that water comes off of your parking lot there. See, my property is right here, and there's a swamp and a creek that goes across the back of my property.
What he's saying is that anything that comes off of that developed portion of the property
Right, it's
will
gonna
be,
come back
will
here.
be, it'll be
actually will not.
maintained.
Stop in
stop
that.
here.
It'll be maintained there.
Okay.
So actually, we're not allowed to discharge what's already going there. We have to discharge less for this design.
Yeah.
So in terms of cleaning out the stream and whatever, unfortunately, you get into a lot of regulatory issues with DEP and Army Corps. So I imagine potentially that's why the mosquito control district stopped doing it.
Yeah. But they have to maintain what's coming off of the developed portion. They can't let that go back there. So,
Well, there's a lot of water that comes.
Oh, I'm sure
from
there is.
somewhere across here whenever
Yeah.
we get a good rain.
yeah, but
And it seems like after they paved J.D. Miller, it got worse.
I'm sure it
And
did.
now
Probably
every
did.
time it rains, it gets worse.
yeah, but they can only be responsible for what they're developing.
Okay, but if you keep adding these down the road and over here,
They're
Well,
supposed to keep up with
ideally,
theirs too.
anything that's built will have to do the same thing they're doing, maintain that stormwater runoff.
It should in theory help you.
Yeah. it
Ideally,
should.
it is a reduction.
okay,
That's correct.
well, thank you.
You bet, thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Where's your park?
Right here.
How do you, is it like gonna be a boardwalk?
There is, it may be hard to see, there's actually an 8-foot boardwalk that traverses that 50-foot stretch of wetlands. Elevated boardwalk.
Okay. Is anybody else who wishes to address this item? Yes, ma'am.
Quite a moment. Okay, this one is very close to where I live, and I believe I've already heard construction equipment back in the back taking down trees, unless it was on another lot very close. First of all, I have to say I'm against this because the island is way too overbuilt. Secondly, when you show the map, who's got the button on the map? Can you go back to the watery part where it shows the blue? There. This appears to be all water, or what is that, flood zone? So when you talk about getting with FEMA to change the map, you're not just talking about changing the map, you're talking about changing the land, meaning this you, sir, the developer, are planning on filling in all that flood zone, like bringing in fill dirt and raising the land up?
No,
No?
that's actually incorrect with regards to the flood zone study. With the flood zone study, this is an area known as unnumbered zone A. So in this particular case, what that will do is it will assign a designated elevation to the flood zone. So assuming the consultant's numbers stay where they are right now, the flood zone elevation will be an elevation of 9.8, which means in a storm, a 100-year storm event,
It'll be
that is
9
what
feet
That
underwater.
is what it is proposed to, well, not necessarily 9 feet underwater, it depends on the elevation of your land. But it will be 9.8, and in this particular case, we do not impact anything below 9.8. We are not filling in anything below the flood zone in this particular case.
And I'd ask you to address your questions up here. We'll let him answer that.
Okay, yeah, it's just, it seems like an awful lot to build in a flood zone. And, you know, I'm really sorry I wasn't here in 2012 when this whole rezoning thing happened and somebody came up with this idea of town center. I was taking care of an aunt dying of Alzheimer's. If I had been here in 2014, there's no way that whole town center thing would have happened, because this entire block, which is like section 30 of 18 West 2 South, contains all of the tributaries for my creek. that goes out into the bay, which means it's an access to food for me and my whole neighborhood. And I'm worried that if you build anything more than what's already been built, which is too much, that it's just going to totally kill my creek. So like this whole idea that y'all had about town center and this classification of village mixed use, it's just not going to happen because there's a whole mass of land there that needs to stay completely undeveloped for the health and welfare of the creek, therefore the health and welfare of the bay, therefore the health and welfare of the the shellfish estuary that the
So
bay
you're
is.
opposed to this development?
I'm completely opposed
Okay.
to anything more than a single family home on a half-acre lot. And I'm
Okay.
opposed to anything in any of the what used to be paper land.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll close public comments.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to point out, I'm sure you've already read it in your staff report, the Mosquito Control District's comments. The applicant has agreed to allow access back there so they can spray and control the juvenile and the eggs and the adult mosquitoes. But I just wanted to
Yeah.
touch on that.
We got that. Commissioners, any other questions, comments?
It's nice to hear there's gonna be some workforce housing built down here. God bless you. Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8.
Thank you, Commissioners. This brings us to the last item on our quasi-judicial agenda tonight. This is the Point Washington Preserve. It's requested approved by final order. It's been reviewed by Bob Durante. He will further introduce.
Thank you, Mac. This is a major development order application submitted by Nautilus Civil Engineering Incorporated on behalf of Southern Hybrid Homes, LLC, requesting a technical approval to operate a 693 square foot multi-purpose building as well as a 5,247 square foot pavilion. The applicant is also asking for conceptual approval of phase 2, 3, and 4. This project is located from the intersection of US Highway 98 and J.D. Miller Road, north approximately 0.7 miles, and it's on the left side on 9.76, and the future land use is Town Center 1. Mr. Chair, I'd like to give you a little history on this. These buildings are currently built. The applicant has obviously a active code violation. Went to the code board. Part of the mitigation of it or resolution of it was to get a development order. The applicant chose to ask for conceptual approval of the other phases to kind of wrap up the property. So this is the second phase step of moving through the development order process. So the applicant has worked with us and worked with us well on this throughout the process. And you see on the project analysis the breakdown of everything by the different phases. There was no previous development orders issued for this parcel, as I explained about the code enforcement violation dated October 19th to 2017. All the comments have been addressed, and this project does meet the Walton County Transportation Concurrency under the Walton County Land Development Code. All fire comments were addressed. Mosquito controls has comments. The applicant, I believe, has agreed to work with mosquito control for the benefit of the whole overall community and his site. So without any further ado, unless you have any questions for me.
I have a question. You said, which phase of this is already built, you said?
Phase 1, the one that we're actually going for technical approval, which would be if moved through this board and recommended, and the county commissioners would choose to approve it, the DO would be issued for that phase 1.
Which is already done.
Yes, sir, bringing that into compliance, and then in the future, they would have to come in for each other phase as a technical review, and additional comments would be raised and such.
What are they out of compliance on?
Well, they built the structure and the pavilion there.
Without any,
Without
Yes.
Without any kind of
Nothing.
whatsoever?
nothing?
What are they using it for?
It is going to be a multi-use center. It could be for educational purposes. It could be for family gatherings, and also the pavilion could be used for picnics and such. But I'll let the applicant address that if you don't have any further questions for me.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening. I'm Doug Lyles. I've been sworn in. So I'm director of Good Samaritan Institute. We've been in Santa Rosa Beach on 393 North for 15 years. We facilitate science education. This facility was built to house our scientists that come in to the area. We did get a permit on this, but we did it under an exemption. And then we found that that was not going to be allowed after it was already built. So it was permitted and inspected, the cottage was. The pavilion, this project is unique. It's very unique. It's completely surrounded by state forest. We have 300 acres of state forest, so we don't impact our neighbors. We have no electricity running out there, so we're completely off grid. We have the pavilion. It has solar panels on it, and so we generate all the power for the project. So we built it. We had an event out there. We found out that we needed a development order, which we thought was a CLUC that we needed, Certificate of Land Use. It's the land use for it, of course, is Village Mix, is Town Center 1, which is allowed, but that's not sufficient. I find out after the fact, after it's already been built, that it's not just that the land use is proper and that it's inspected when it's built, but also this is a process we have to go through. So we started the process back, I guess, in April or May, and when we found this out, so we originally were told it would be a minor development order. We went through the minor development order process, and during that process, part of the process, we found out that the project has to have 3 uses for the interpretation of the Town Center 1. So we did not have 3 uses, we had 2 uses. So one of them is an event pavilion, and one is a single family home or an office. It's a small building. It's 15 feet by 45 feet, so it's 660 square feet. But that got us 2 of the uses. It didn't get us the 3rd use. So we were faced with, we could deed an access or an easement to the county and have a park area. We decided against that because of vandalism we've had out there, because it's so remote and it's across from the high school. And so we had some trouble with theft and vandalism out there right before we had to make a choice whether we wanted to go forward with a minor development order, which would have been much faster and less expensive, or move forward with a major development order and then add a 3rd use. So we decided to move forward with the major development order, start over again, go through the process, and our 3rd use are the apartments in front. So I'm a builder also. I'm trained as a microbiologist, but I'm a builder for my vocation. And so we'll build the apartments eventually, but I'm a single member LLC, and I don't like to borrow money. So it's going to be a while before we do the apartments. The reason we picked the apartments instead of townhomes is because if you don't plat, then you don't have to pay the sewer and impact fees up front. So paying, in round numbers, about $10,000 for each unit. So that times 60 would be completely outside any budget that I've ever personally worked with. So that's the reason we went with the apartments. You can build them, you know, at a slower pace and not have to pay all the impact fees. So I believe we've addressed all the comments. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
What kind of apartments?
So we're working. There's a Sadowski fund that the state has for affordable housing. So we're just now starting the process to work with the county, some of the county commissioners, on getting some Sadowski funds and doing some workforce housing as it relates to the teachers, because it's so close, and for Northwest Florida State College. But I will tell you that we're so early in the process, I don't have anything specific to report. I do see an unmet need, and that's one. I'm an officer of our Builders Association, the BIA, also, and that's an unmet need that South Walton has, is workforce housing. It's something that we, as a association, work on. So that's pretty much it.
Do you have a time frame about when you want to get this built?
Well, I think it's really, I'm new to the process. I haven't done a development order before, so which would be the reason I didn't know that I wasn't doing it right the first time, but I'm learning a lot fast. I would want to have it built so that we didn't lose our ability to build, and I don't know the answer to that question. So as fast as I have to build them, I'm going to try to build them. But as far as we have a deadline and there's a partner pushing, or there's a reason to build them other than just losing the ability to build them, it would be over the period of years before we would build the whole thing out. I mean, I would say, 10 years to build the whole thing out.
What's the uses you foresee on the pavilion?
The pavilion, we had the kickoff party for the Parade of Homes for the Builders Association out there. We will hire scientists and engineers that come in and have events out there. We had an event scheduled. We had a couple of events scheduled that we canceled when this came up because it would be in violation of our code violation. The fire department was going to use it for their family day, so we had to cancel that. And my daughter is a cheerleader for South Walton, and they were invited to go to the Macy's Day Parade in New York, and we were going to have a fundraiser out there, and we canceled that because we had to go through this process we're going through now. So, and then we could have weddings out there as well. We don't have any booked out there right now. We would hope it would generate enough income to where it would be able to pay for our scientists and engineers that come in to participate in our project. We call our project the Santa Rosa Project.
This is going to be a major development order.
That's what it is. It's a major development order.
Is there a shelf life? Is there a shelf life on the development order?
I'm Curtis Smith, Nautilus Civil Engineers. I've been sworn in.
Matt, I'm trying to ask Mike a question. Is there a shelf life for the major development order?
Phase projects can have a schedule for development of those future phases as approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Initially, the first phase technical typically has a 1-year shelf life. But if the conceptual portion of the project is based on a schedule of development over time, and that's provided as part of the development order, once we get to the BCC, they could approve that based on whatever schedule they felt might be appropriate.
And each phase
And I suspect, and the apartment phase would come back if it's more than 30 units at one time. If they do less than 30 units, it would be processed as minor development. This is a very nice facility. It was a subject of code enforcement. They've done a very nice job preparing this pavilion. All we needed to do was go through the development order process to remedy the code violation. And Mr. Lyles is doing that. He's been very cooperative. It's a good project, and it's well located for a place of public assembly. They could even have a church service there. It's a 5,000 square foot pavilion. It's beautiful inside. A lot of expensive woodwork in the roof structure, and they created a self-sustaining development that's green. They're producing all their electricity. Now, I suspect that probably wouldn't be the case for the apartments, but for the facility that's presently there, I think they've employed a Tesla large wall battery kind of thing, but it's surrounded by state forest. Nobody lives next to it, so as a location for a place of public assembly like a wedding reception or some kind of party as he has described, it's out in the middle of the woods.
Is it big enough for things like concerts and?
You could probably have some kind of musical event inside this pavilion. It's 5,000 square feet under roof.
The old jazz festival they used to have at Gulf. I mean, is it big enough for something like that?
Might not be quite big enough for that, but certainly something similar on a slightly smaller scale. And the good thing about it is it's not next to anything, and there are very few venues like that in Walton County. And we believe it would be an asset to the community. We just got to get it properly permitted, and we got good cooperation, and we're on the way to that. Thank you.
Any other questions? The developer.
Real quick, this is all I want to do is show you guys this plan that's on the screen. This is the current plan. What you had before had the apartment buildings. The pavilion is up in the northwest corner. It's quite small. I don't even know if you can zoom in on it. But right now it's a gravel road back to that. We didn't have to do stormwater or anything because the impact is so small it's not even measurable in the calculations.
Right. Okay, thank you. Anybody else any questions of the applicant? I understand that, but we need to get there first. All right, we'll open public comments. Yes, ma'am.
Coy Bowman.
Please state your name and were you sworn in?
Coy Bowman, I was sworn in, yes. Okay. Okay, when a person picks a place to live, like the women that left earlier because they were so frustrated with you, you're looking for a place that will stay the same for 50 years. Like she was saying, when I moved here, I knew this was going to be like this and this was going to be like this, and you depend on it because your life from the age that you can buy a house is usually about 50 years you're going to live in it. Now, my entire 43 years of being alive, this block has been forest, because it has to remain forest. A, because there's a creek tributary in it. B, because if you cut down the trees, you destabilize the island. Okay, so now I don't know if you all have ever been on this island during a hurricane. This island picks up and moves around. The water gets up underneath it, the whole thing turns to slop, it raises up above where it normally sits, and then it settles back down. So now, the next time we have a major hurricane, and Opal was not a major hurricane, when we have a major hurricane, all of these underground water filtration systems, all of this new piping you've put into the ground, it's all just going to go to pot because it's going to raise up and slam back down. Okay, so now, he says this is surrounded by state forest. This is state forest. It's part of the railroad grant that was leased to St. Joe. So technically it belongs to me because I'm the heir to the railroad. Okay, so now I'll discuss that with the owners later. They'll pay a huge penalty. It also begins with a chain of unqualified sales. Okay, and I don't know who would want to have a wedding in the middle of a forest where they might get mauled by a bear or a panther. I mean, that's just crazy to say that you're going to have public events in the middle of a forest like that. You can't have lights because it disturbs the wildlife. You can't have noise because it disturbs the wildlife. It should have never been done in the first place. This was previously owned by somebody called Ski Properties, who are the people who first began the Slalom Way development, where all of the ground has been fracked away for its natural gas. That's why there's water now. So like the natural gas fracking that's going on before houses are developed turns the land into water, and then in 20 years from now, anything you build on it is just going to sink down into the earth. So again, I'm against putting anything on here other than maybe 2 houses because it's in the middle of a flood zone. It's part of the forest. It has creek tributaries in it, and it legally belongs to me. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good
Melissa
evening.
Ward. I'm not here working for anybody tonight. So
Were you
there you
sworn in?
go. I am not.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. It's not testimony, it's a question.
Okay.
In particular, I couldn't see that from back there, the phasing plan. I would like to know if it's okay for Curtis to come show me where the phasing part
Sure.
is. And while he's doing that, I have 2 questions. One, it mentions lodging, but it doesn't mention, but the site plan says there's no residential for this phase. So what is the lodging? And is it somebody's house, it's somebody's apartment, or is it a place where somebody comes and stays, visits? That's my one question. And then the other is, the rest of this is all conceptual, not a technical. Just this part is the technical? Is that? Okay, so if you could just.
Okay, so phase 1, which is already built, is what was permitted originally as a residence. It's the size of residence. Currently has nothing inside of it. We're calling it a multi-purpose building because sometimes it will just be a place for people to go and go to the restroom. Sometimes it'll be for scientists to stay the night. Sometimes it'll be for a group of scientists to go in and sit at a table and work, similar to an office. So it doesn't have a full-time use assigned to the actual building. It's really,
This or this, I'm sorry.
that's the
That little
small
one.
residence.
Okay.
The pavilion is civic space. It's just for, open space event.
Sure. And first, let me say, too, this sounds lovely. This sounds wonderful, and I commend you for putting something together for people to come out and see things. So let me just say that. My only question was, as lodging and/or whatever it is, whether it's counted as non-residential uses or residential, because it doesn't count as residential. That was my only question.
Okay.
And then, and the roadways are already in? You have a road there?
It's gravel.
It's gravel. Okay.
It's a lime rock base essentially, which fire has actually approved for the width.
Okay. Thank you very
Got
much.
it?
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public comments. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. We have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Chairman, if I may just, for the record, just make it clear that Mr. Roberts was not present for the discussion or the vote on this particular issue.
Correct.
He filled out. Or there is a recusal form as well? Okay, just noting that for the record.
Okay, thank you. And I believe that concludes our agenda. We'd be adjourned.
All right.
It's only 8 o'clock.
Which is pretty good considering what all we had to do.
Not a big fan of approving boo-boos, but that's a pretty good project.
Yeah, the only way he got away with it is because he didn't have full power.